Hey y'all, welcome to the Queer and Far Podcast, a travel podcast from a couple of queer femmes providing tips and resources to travel safely while Black, brown, queer, disabled, or from any marginalized group and intersections in between. I am your Sir Auntie, Sharmane Fury, aka daBlasianBlerd, and my fellow co-host and friend,
Shae Nahnigans, still the noob.
The way I behave sometimes, I'm noobing
it. I just think I'm rubbing off on you. Wait, internet, behave. That was a little blue.
I'm so tired. Okay, what are we doing? We are back. And I have to do this disclaimer. I know last time I had a different disclaimer. This week's disclaimer is I was supposed to release the last episode, a week before I actually ended up releasing it. I uploaded it, didn't hit submit, got on a plane without my laptop, and a week later didn't get home for a week later, so the episode came late. So I apologize for that. This one will be on time and get us all back on track, but I messed up. I messed up. The first time ever in my life, I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to need my laptop. I never use it when I travel. I'm not going to bring it. I'll bring my iPad instead. And yeah, whatever.
Damn it.
It's fine. It's fine. But yeah, so we are back. And for this episode, because I've been on the road so much, I thought we would kind of chat about my experiences, the different types of travel that I did, the events that I did, and generally the things that I was trying to observe while also just trying to experience whatever the different things.
Okay. I like this because I want to know all the things. So should we do it chronologically or?
Yeah, we can do it chronologically. I think that makes more sense because also like mentally, I'm still trying to process. Like so what? I've been home now. Was it 4 days?
4 days.
I came home on Tuesday. Today's Saturday. And it was so weird because I didn't have time between each event to process what I experienced. So while I'm like second to last day in Atlanta for DragonCon, someone said something about, oh, you were speaking somewhere recently too. And I was like, no, that was last. Yep. Yep, I actually did. It was technically last month, yes, but that was a week ago. But I couldn't even make the separation of like that was only a week ago.
Right. It was one big queer blur.
It was a whole damn blur. So I'm trying to also piece together my experience in real time in this conversation.
Okay, well, let's do it any way we can help. I mean, I'm surprised you're upright because it was a lot of traveling.
I didn't expect
and you were moving at a fast pace.
I was, and I didn't expect it to be as exhausting, especially because like I'm antisocial enough to go back to my room constantly. So I thought I was giving myself like breaks, but I don't remember. Like I'll really have to think. You know, like because Podcast Movement was the first of this series of trips,
and that
started
Houston.
August 22nd.
That was Houston.
That was Dallas.
Sorry.
Yeah, because I'm in Houston. But a week before that, though, I was in Oklahoma.
Right.
Because I was visiting my friend whose child was in the softball championship thing for 12-year-olds. And then a week before that, I was in Dallas for my friend's birthday. So if I really think about it, space it out, I did 4 states, 4 cities, with multiple trips to 2 of those cities, and then ended back up in the thing. So by the time I got to Dallas, I was like ready for my I'm gonna be almost 3 weeks on. It's 3 things. It's gonna be awesome. But I can't even keep Dallas feels so long ago.
It feels long ago for me as well, but for different reasons.
Yeah, it's just so crazy.
Now and this was this
was Podcast Movement.
Okay, so tell me, let's talk about it. What was their tagline? What was their reason?
I'll pull up all of my badges for each one. So
okay, I'm ready.
Podcast Movement. Okay. So Podcast Movement is like the largest podcast based conference, I think in the world, definitely here in the States. And I've wanted to go for a couple of years, but to be honest, now that I've gone, I feel like this would have been a lot more useful for me in like my first year of podcasting. Mostly because a lot of the things that they themed there tracks are on. So you got like a monetization track or how to get social media following track, or how to turn your pod into your business track. So there's all these different tracks or whatever. And I was kind of focusing more on the monetization track because after 4 years of podcasting, that's the area that I'm lacking the most. I make a little bit of money on Militantly Mixed through Patreon sponsorship, but the rest of my shows at this point are pretty much just for fun because I don't get any, I don't really even get any sponsorship from listeners or anything like that. So,
well, did you find the information useful?
I found the information, the kind of stuff I've heard on any kind of workshop I've ever done or any kind of YouTube channel I've ever done. So in that case, that wasn't a thing. I think the funny thing about it, okay, so now it's starting to come back to me now that I'm kind of in this space. The funny thing about it is that it's a networking opportunity for podcasters, absolutely.
Okay.
But you can tell the difference between a more seasoned podcaster, like I can say myself, compared to a noob who is just like out there on their own, like a solo noob. Like if you and I went together, I would be balancing you, you'd be balancing me. So I
would be on a leash. That's the truth. No, I'm not kidding. Because I will wander off. She'd be like, no, come back.
You might have like an insight or an excitement about something because you just start out that I would be like, oh, okay, let's pay attention to this or whatever, right? Or I would be like, oh, no, you don't have to worry about that. That's going to send you down a path. I already did that path 4 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Like that would have been what it was. But I was encountering people that were like, I literally heard, and I tweeted this because I remember it being so ridiculous, is I heard somebody, I like to do the overheard at, so like when you're standing in line, you hear someone say something. And this guy said, oh, you do a podcast too? That's so crazy. I have a podcast. Fucking duh. I was like, we're at a podcast conference. We're all podcasters. We all have podcasts.
Friend. Is that your, was that your, hey, how you doing?
It was so stupid. And the other part is like there would be people who just like audacity and let's play a fun game of guess what the podcaster was. Someone would be like, are you familiar with my podcast? I don't know who they are. I don't know their name. I don't know anything. I don't know their face. Nothing. But they
just based on looking at them,
just standing next to you in line, they'd be like, oh, do you have a podcast? Like, yeah, fucking duh, I have a fucking podcast. Like, what the fuck am I here? I wear, whenever I go to events that are podcast related, I always wear I have like my Steve Jobs outfit, right? It's usually like a black t-shirt with black jeans, my Jordans that are black and yellow and white because I'm representing all my races. And then I have my Militantly Mixed hoodie. If it's too hot for a hoodie, then I'll wear a Militantly Mixed themed shirt.
Okay.
Or because that's the show that I get most traction on. That's the thing I'm kind of known for. That's what I go speaking engagements for and stuff like that. But if I'm there for multiple days, I will switch out which podcast t-shirt I wear. Okay. You know, I didn't make a Queer and Far t-shirt. Well, we don't have. Yeah. So I need to get that done. But so yeah, I was either wearing Blerd Comics or I was wearing By Furious or Militantly Mixed and stuff like that. And so the people are like, are you familiar with my podcast? And then it would be silence. And so I remember saying to someone, I was like, you would have to give information to me for me to be able to figure out who you are. And the look on this person's face was just like, you don't know who I am?
Okay.
So pause. This is where we guess.
Okay.
What was this podcaster?
Men with microphones.
Essentially.
Okay. A podcast is mostly for people who are listening. I understand that sometimes people want to look at our ugly mugs. God love you for being here. I appreciate you.
And a lot of people have like a video podcast,
right? Like a video thing, but most of the time, podcasts are for listening. What do you mean? Just look at me and tell me what I'm doing. What a stupid icebreaker question. How much was
definitely it was one of these.
I'm shocked.
With a penis, a white with a penis. And you know what? To be honest, and while I still don't know who this person is, I'm assuming they have a very large YouTube following.
Or did you get their name? Should I Google it?
I mean, I don't care. I was just like, I just turned around. I was just like, because they're kind of just talking where I didn't even realize like I was being addressed in the crowd. You know, it was sort of like whoever was standing next to this person.
You're like, oh, hello.
And so I, you know, and then so like I kind of like I did one of, this is what happened is I kind of did one of these because it was such a dumb question that I'd be like, someone would need to know something, right? That being said, like your badge does say like what your thing is.
Oh,
if you put it on.
So,
but like I would either have to look down. So mine says ManeHustle Media /militantly mixed, so that like I was indicating that I had a network and I had a show, but you can only put one show, so that's what I did. So you know, the other cool thing, I'll get into that afterwards, but I'll finish the story. So I did one of these because it was just like there was nothing else. So I was like, did something happen? Did the person disappear behind me? Like, why did this sentence end with "Are you familiar with my show?" when I don't know anything? And then he made eye contact with me and it was still silent. And I looked behind him and all this other kind of stuff. And so when I realized I'm being addressed, I'm like, you know, I would need more information to figure out who you are, you know, like your name and your show or something like that. And it was just that like, what? You don't know who I am? And for all I know, like it could have been Ben fucking Shapiro, because I found out later he was at that event. I never saw him, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it could have just been that guy. It could have been one of those kind of guys. Like, it was just a average white that was standing there looking very drabby, but exuding all the confidence in the fucking planet. And I don't remember if I just turned or if like the thing opened up for us to walk through, but it was just like, that's where it ended. So I don't have a finish to that story. But there was this divide between like the kind of noob that would be like, hey, you should check out my podcast. You should listen to my podcast.
Okay. Two.
If I was in a different company, if I was not in mixed company, I would have said something completely different than what I'm going to try to change it into, which is basically, motherfucker, no one's here to listen to your podcast. Not a one of us is here to listen to anybody else's podcast. Yeah. That's not what this kind of networking is here. Like this kind of networking is, I have a podcast host. I need a producer. Are there producers in the crowd? Okay, bet. Mm-hmm. You know, I need a new host
sound mixer. I need
a sound mixer, like that kind of stuff. Like that's the kind of networking you're doing. But some of these noobs were out here like you should listen to my podcast without the exchange part, because that's the other part of networking that is weird with podcasters is they want you to listen to their podcast, but they don't want to listen to yours.
That sounds about right.
And it's like, dude, if you don't want to listen to mine, do you think I want to listen to yours? Like, what are you giving that makes me want to listen to you over you listening to me?
Maybe it was that podcaster that likes to like look at the camera when he's in the forest and he says things like, this is why I don't allow my wife to set up boundaries.
Ew.
Yeah, I was like,
oh, is that? I think this guy has popped up on my For You. Like,
I'm like, you're in the forest. Stitched. You're in the forest right now, so your wife can't hear you.
Is he the one that says something like, there's no, where are the alpha men in the world? Yes. Oh, alpha men don't want to hear women, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that was a podcast. So I thought that was just a dumb shit that recorded a TikTok that someone.
They're all podcasters. We're all podcasters.
We're all podcasters. Everybody's got a podcast.
Everybody has a podcast.
So there was a lot of things like that. The other thing about this conference, though, is that I got an opportunity to meet podcasters that I've actually known, like in the online space, for a really long time.
Well, so that's cool.
I've been a member of a group called the BIPOC Podcast Creators on Facebook, which is a free resource for BIPOC podcasters. And you know, they do workshops sometimes you pay for those, sometimes they're free. There's a free newsletter, there's resource guides. If there's a job out in the world, they'll post about it. They do a weekly it's two folks, so they'll do a weekly like live stream or something like that. And actually one of those creators was on my show Militantly Mixed years and years ago. And so this is the first time I've gotten to meet them in person.
That really beautiful Black woman that you took a picture with, was that her?
Did I take pictures with them?
There was a stunning.
Oh no, that's a FUA. That's from DragonCon. That's a different story.
Oh,
so
sorry.
Okay. The overall thing, though, of these 3 weeks of travel was that in every place I went to, I was meeting. in almost every place I went to, I just realized that wasn't true, and I was about
She's
to
like,
lie.
stop, edit.
I had to stop for a second. In almost every place I went to, I was meeting someone that I've known for years online that I hadn't met in person, and that started the podcast movement. So, so the creators of the BIPOC podcast creators group is Tangia and Maribel. I know Tangia. I have seen, she's been on my show. I actually edited one of her shows for a couple of months a while back before I decided freelance wasn't for me. And so I actually got a glimpse of her, like her walking, but she was far enough away that I was like, I'm not walking that far to hunt someone down. But then I was walking past her the next day and she just yelled, Sharmane. So I'm not expecting to hear my name in a crowd. So I was like, turn around. I was like, oh, hey. And then I was like, hey, what's up? And then I realized that, hey, what's up was like the kind of what's up you do to someone you know in meet space and not someone that you've known on the internet for 3 years and have never seen in person. So I was like, oh, wait, this is weird. This is the first time I'm actually clapping eyes on your face. So we walked around for a little while. I met Maribel through her as well, who I've exchanged with in typing form, but never video chat or anything like that. So I hung out with them for a little while. And thanks to Maribel and Tangia, she was like, did you get your water bottle yet from Spotify? And I was like, there's a water bottle from Spotify? So of all the exhibition halls, Spotify had the best swag. It was a free glass, I think it's actually behind me, but it's a free glass water bottle that had a white cover on the outside so it doesn't get all moist and wet and stuff like that. Nice. And it does say Spotify and Anchor on it, but you can't really see it because it's white and it's indented. I was like, dope. So I was super excited about that free water bottle. Because other places give you like a sticker or something like that, whatever. Blah, blah, pencil. But that was like, I was like, Spotify. I mean,
so did Spotify? Okay, I don't mean to interrupt, but like, is it? Was this being hosted by several like groups?
So podcast movement is its own entity in the way that like San Diego Comic-Con is an entity. You know, like it's that, right? It's but then they have all kinds of sponsors, and so Spotify, Podbean, there's a number of sponsors that were on it. Yeah, YouTube had a pretty big presence. That's right, because I was sending you stuff. There was stuff like I wanted to send you because I'm like, I'm definitely gonna forget this after 3 weeks of travel. So I was just like texting you.
I'm gonna have to go back and find it again because
I know it was like I should have put it in like note form, but instead I was just like texting it because like I need to get this out.
We're gonna have to come up with a way of like either we Dropbox it or we put it in the Google thing. We're gonna have to have something. Yeah.
Because it was so like impromptu. I was like, "Ooh, I didn't expect that." And send it over. So I ended up doing more monetization and YouTube based things. Right. So I would say like the YouTube stuff was probably the most useful because you and I start this show directly with YouTube. We didn't go through I've been on the podcast for months and now, or a year or two, and now I'm doing video, which is what happened with Blerd Comics. We switched over to video after doing the show for 3 years. Right. This is how this starts. And so I'm like, I know I don't know enough about how people get their shows listened to. The funny thing is that I need to start doing it again. But I changed my host site and that's why it doesn't happen automatically anymore. But I used to push an audio only version of Militantly Mixed onto YouTube that just had my episode art as the video. I had so many downloads from YouTube because YouTube is usually available at work. And so people might listen at work and they have their screen minimized. Mm-hmm. And I have tons of comments on my YouTube page. I learned really quickly not to read the comments on the YouTube page though, because in particular, there's one guy who gets on there to constantly tell me to stop equating queerness with mixedness because the two things aren't related. When literally I'm never equating queerness and mixedness. I'm just a queer mixed person. I'm like, you can't tell me about my experience. I'm literally a queer person who is also a mixed person. And the reason why I talk about both is because I'm both of those things at one time. So shut the fuck up and stop listening to my show. But also, he would listen.
Offer resources then if you want to tell me where I'm going to need. It's just like
ridiculous. Something. And it was multiple videos that he would comment under. And so after a while, I'm like, you know what? I'm never going to read the comments again. And so I switched podcast hosts to this current company that I'm using, which I'm already considering switching again, which is Podetize, because what they sold me and what is actually the case is not working for me. Although it is affordable at the moment, it's not doing everything that I want it to do. Whereas Libsyn, which is the pinnacle of all podcast host sites, is what I used to have my show on. It's more expensive. It does do some of the things you want it to do, but you have to get into those high downloads until it really does everything you want. And so I got to find something else. I'm looking at another one that I connected with at Podcast Movement. So some of that is the networking of like, I am thinking about changing host sites. Who do I talk to? That kind of stuff. That being said, I don't go and talk to people if I don't want to. So like I was just like walking around and stuff, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna email that person later. Like I knew that I didn't want to see people in public and stuff. And it was a mixed bag between people wearing masks and not. So I wouldn't go. Okay,
let's go into that. So like I think let's start off with, who do you think their target audience was?
White men with microphones and business-based podcasts.
Okay. And then so would you say that from the people that you were talking to that you have more relationship with, what did they think of the event?
Well, they actually hosted an event. So so a couple of things. They were moderators on a number of panels, and I did not apply to be a moderator on this thing because at the time that was available was around the time I was transitioning out of my comic book shop, and I really couldn't think beyond that at the time. And in hindsight, I wish I kind of paused and let myself do that, because I would have applied for a DragonCon panel. I would have applied to Podcast Movement and stuff like that. But I just wasn't in the mind state at the time, so I didn't. But the BIPOC podcast creators, they had a meetup on the last day that I was there, which was the Thursday. And there was tons of people there. So I'm actually standing in line with someone, and like a woman introduces herself to me, and I was like, hey, I've actually listened to your podcast. And it was because on the podcaster group, there's once a week you can post an episode, but you post an episode and you have to listen to at least, that's your agreement. You listen to at least one other person's podcast that week as sort of payment for trying to get other people to listen to your thing, like to use that networking space. And so I've listened to a number of podcasts, like one episode at a time, unless it has grabbed me. And I just so happened to listen to hers. And so her eyes were like, no, you haven't. And I was like, actually, yeah, I was on one of those swap days, So I said, so I have listened to at least one episode. So we ended up kind of chit-chatting, and I ended up talking to about 4 or 5 people that I probably wouldn't have engaged with if it wasn't like I at least know the BIPOC podcaster, group. So, okay, anybody here is probably a safe person to talk to.
Okay. And then of the, even because like what that sad little man leaving comments for you is stop comparing queerness to mixedness.
Yeah.
Okay. With that said, do you think how was the representation for the LGBTQ?
So so I barely saw any queer related things. I'm sure there were, but I didn't see any, besides the occasional queer person that ended up on a stage. I didn't see a whole lot of queer representation. The other problem that happened with this conference that bothered me was that they double booked BIPOC events. So I think it was the Wednesday night of that event, there was a Amplify Black Voices and a Latinx panel, both at the same time on the same night. The next day it happened again with something else, and it's a foggy, but I think it was BIPOC something, which had the people from BIPOC podcast creators, and the other thing was a Latina thing as well. So it's just like, bro, I know scheduling a conference of that magnitude is rough. And I like, in comparison to something like DragonCon, like I don't even know how they start with DragonCon. It's insane. They have like 200 things going on every hour.
Right.
But Podcast Movement probably roughly has about 5 to 10 panels happening in different rooms at the same time.
Okay.
So if you have super marginalized groups, you should start your booking with those, and you plug those in. Obviously you have your keynotes and different things that are in certain spaces. Obviously you can plug those in first, but then you go to your marginalized, you go to your disabled, you go to your LGBTQ, you go to your BIPOC, whatever. And then after that, you put all the dime a dozen shit in, right?
Yeah.
So they seem to be more careful, and not too careful, because there was still a lot of overlap. There was a ton of monetization stuff that was happening at the same time. And I was deciding between like, well, fuck, I want to do this.
So
this
it's like
one
they
was
were
more important.
grouping things together when they shouldn't have. They should have been
Yeah,
stacking.
they
So
should have
like
been stacking.
I could have been like, all right, at noon, I'm going to do, okay, look, there's 3 options for doing monetization.
Yeah,
Like,
you go to this
morning,
one, I'll go to this
midday,
one.
afternoon.
Yeah.
But if you're doing it all at once, well, what if I wanted to do that, but now I don't get anything on the monetization? Okay,
Yeah. So if we had a team situation, we
Right.
could have split up. But, you know, running it solo, I was really deciding between like increasing your newsletter readership and converting that into, you know, sponsorship and or sales. At the same time, I'm looking at like, how do you get advertisement?
Right.
Well, when you're less than 1,000 downloads.
So
a week.
like, I think what I'm hearing from you is like, it sounds like they had, I mean, yes, it's not like DragonCon with 200 things happening every hour, but 10 things happening every hour are still good choices. And you could have,
they could have done that. Yeah. And so that was the biggest takeaway, even from like when I was at the BIPOC event, was that like a lot of us that were sitting around talking to each other was like, I had to pick last night between Amplified Black Voices and, you know, Latinx Stories, I think is what it was. So it's like, as a mixed Black person, obviously I'm going to choose Blackness before anything else. But had those things not been at the same time, I would have been like, ooh, something for brown people. I'm going to do both, you know? And the other part is like, if they had done it with Asian and Black at the same time, again, for me, because I'm very hierarchical in my identity, I would have probably done the Black thing first.
Right.
That being said, if it was very specific to Japanese-ness or something like that, I might have chosen that one instead, you know, like things like that. But because they were pitting them against each other, and because that was happening so many times, because that also happened when I was at Comic Palooza, right? My event and Byron's event from the comic book shop, which I was supposed to be on, was scheduled at the same time. So I had to choose my panel over his panel.
Right. And
instead of doing both. Yeah. And even our customers had to split. So like some of them literally went to half of his and then came into mine or vice versa.
When you could have been.
Yeah. So
all the support behind it. Yeah.
So I've already talked to Comic Palooza about that. They did it multiple times. Podcast Movement, I haven't submitted because I've been too busy, but I haven't submitted my review of it yet. But I'm going to say that too. And I'm sure, you know, I'm absolutely sure they've heard this before, but they just don't care because
they don't listen.
There's more white people there than there are
and
brown people.
So I am speaking to the internets now because Sharmane already knows this. And when we sometimes have conversations, it's already inferred what we're talking about. But to break it down by some people who may be looking at me like me and looking at us right now going, what is the big deal? Intersectionality is extremely important. And marginalized voices are not heard, period.
Yeah.
And when you're pitting them against each other, it makes it even worse.
Because you know what it feels like? It feels like, hey, y'all, it's marginalization hour.
Right.
You know, like, and
we're going to tokenize it. And
right. And so, like, I imagine that there could have potentially been like a queer thing, an LGBT or a disabled thing, a Black thing, a brown
all
thing,
happening
an
at
Asian
the same
thing,
hour.
all happening at the same hour. Be like, dang, we banged all that out. We're great. We can just go on to the rest.
And as somebody who is rabidly trying to consume different medias that are outside of my culture, you're also limiting the audience. Like, I want to go and experience blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And I know more people too. And if they were given the opportunity, imagine if I didn't know that about that. I didn't know that. I mean, how many times do white people say that in a day? I didn't know about that. I didn't know about that. Where they're not even being given the opportunity to find out because they're being right. Well, okay, I'm going to choose this because I know, I'm going to choose the Black, but then they don't get to learn anything about Latinx people.
Yeah,
right?
And because these two things were totally different in idea and style too. Like Amplified Black Voices was specifically talking about like how to cash in as Black folks in an audio space like this, and how just literally hearing our own voices in addition to what it is we're talking about can be important. And part of that also includes like, you know, not all things that Black folks have to do have to be educational. We want to nerd out and be goofy too. So like it was about all of the different ways in which we could be represented. With Latinx stories, because I didn't attend, I don't 100% know. It seemed more like the use of narrative within podcasting space for Latinx. That would have been really interesting.
That would have been interesting to hear.
I'm just not a Latinx person. So if you had given me the opportunity to go to both things, I would have done my for the culture thing on my side, and then I would have also done the learning about somebody else's stuff on the other side, and I would have been happy to do that. And actually, one of the people that I did end up talking to in line at the BIPOC thing was one of the people who did that event.
Okay.
And so I had mentioned it. Well, I didn't know that to be the case until I started talking. I was like, you know, last night I was pissed because they had Latinx stories and Amplified Black Voices at the same time. And she was like, yeah, that was my panel. And so then we got into like, okay, what was all about? And blah, blah. So it's just like, it's such a common fucking thing that it's not surprising for someone like me to see, whereas like I can say that to a million white people that aren't you, and they would all be like, what? Why is race and culture important?
Why isn't that important?
You know,
because it's important, you guys, that you hear from different perspectives outside of your own.
And that's it.
And that's the big thing. Because how many guys with white guys with microphones, they're all saying the same fucking thing.
And I've been saying this for years about podcasting. It is so easy. And I don't know why, besides racism and white supremacy, it is so easy for a mediocre random ass white guy to press record, put his stuff on Spotify, and immediately have 10,000 listeners in the first month of their thing. Whereas someone like me, who has a very niche, everything I do is very niche. Militantly Mixed, about race and identity from the mixed race perspective. Blerd Comics, about comics and Black culture from a couple of mixed Black birds. Bi Furious, LGBT safe space LGBT for POC folks. You know, like, and then Queer and Far, literally a travel show about traveling while marginalized, and we just both happen to be queer, so that's the intersection we chose to name our show after. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's so niche that like, how do you target people who aren't even the main people who are known to listen to podcasts, who might benefit, who might love fucking listening to podcasts, but aren't even aware of how you can get access to them?
Right.
So before I move on to the next thing, one thing that I will say that I really liked about this, and I think this has more to do with it being a networking based con than just like I'm here for fun, is on the badge. They had these QR codes that were specific to your profile. So if you created a profile on the app, someone could walk up to you and you're networking, you could scan their QR code and it would add you to their profile, your profile to their contacts, and vice versa. And so now I've got these people who I told them, like, I'm traveling for the next couple of weeks, but I'm going to hit you back up. So as long as the app is still available, I can go back and now reach out to these people that I met.
Okay, hold on. So it's a separate app.
It was a podcast app, yeah. So, or it was the event app. So, like, a lot of cons now are starting to either use something like ShowClix or ReadPop, or there's a number of different apps that are like event apps, right?
Okay.
Podcast Movement had their own app, so you could get the schedule, you could book your own schedule, you could connect with folks on the thing, and it would like tell you where everything was. So I downloaded the app a couple days before, and then I was just scanning people whenever I started to meet people, because this was my way of keeping track of them. So I think this is probably the most brilliant thing that they did, given that it was sort of a networking type of thing.
Okay. All right. So, well, the only takeaway that I remember, the thing that stand out to me with you messaging me, I learned a lot. Like, there's some things you sent me and then I looked up by later. But the one thing that stood out to me the most, and it's not a good story, is like you sent a text message and I read it. I read it out loud to Jeff, where you're like, I just watched a grown man sneeze, cough, wipe his hands all over his face, and then dry his hands on the chair in front of me. And then, quote, it's like the pandemic never happened. Yeah. And I'm watching, I'm like, I was like this. I was like, haha.
I just like wanted to walk around with that microphone and just be like around
right
me
after
the whole day. Yeah.
Like, honestly, I would have sprayed his face and asked him to open his mouth.
like I get up, like every time people would cough without masks, I'd get up and move chairs and stuff like that. So that'll I'll put a pin in that because that's going to pop up again in the third event.
No. Okay, we're going to put a pin in it.
Put a pin in coughing raw dog style. And we'll talk about that later. Raw dog
internet.
Raw dogging the planet with your coughs.
I did not
so then the next event that I went to, so though I was actually trying to do like a fly direct thing, but timing wise, I wasn't going to be able to fly directly from Dallas to Anaheim and it be convenient, given that.
Oh, I remember now.
Yeah, so I ended up having to drive. So this is what happened. I have had Podcast Movement and DragonCon booked as events that I was attending this summer since about January.
For a long time.
Mm-hmm. And I thought that was reasonable because Podcast Movement was December, August 23rd to the 26th or 27th. And DragonCon was September 1st or the 5th. It's a Labor Day weekend, 5-day event.
Okay.
So with the couple week, like week and a half in between, I was like, this is going to be dope. This is going to be fine. And then, I attended what is called ClexaCon, which is a t-shirt that I'm wearing right now. ClexaCon is the largest queer woman and femme geek conference, which is based around a fandom that I know fucking nothing about. It's a show called The 100 or 100 or something like that. And I think it's like a post-apocalyptic thing. And there is two girls
Yeah.
So I don't know if the girls actually fall in love or if the audience just wants these two girls to fall in love. And one of them is named Clark and one of them is named Lexi or Lexa. And so they put it together, Clexa. So this whole con is based off of people shipping Clexa.
Okay.
So it's called ClexaCon. Again, I know fucking nothing about this thing. I was Googling like queer women things a while back and I found ClexaCon and I looked up all the stuff and I saw what got me was that I saw that Felicity Day was in attendance at the time that I had looked it up, and I really like Felicity Day. So I was like, oh, dope. She goes to this every year, it looks like. And then I noticed that they had a scholarship thing for people to attend because it's in Vegas. Usually it was in Vegas every year. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to apply to the scholarship. Let's see. Because worst things that happen, I don't get the scholarship. I never go to ClexaCon. Yeah. Well, I got the scholarship, and what I actually got, and this was 2020, what I actually got was my hotel, my plane, and my badge was going to be all taken care of so I can attend this event, which is amazing. And 100% the difference between when women and femmes and non-binary folks are planning an event versus when anybody else is, because they're just so thoughtful about possible things, right? So there was like a handful. I don't remember how many, but there was a.
How much was that total? Like, how much would that have saved you?
It was at the Tropicana, so I imagine for 4 days at the Tropicana, it wasn't too cheap. The original. So it happened the year of the pandemic, so it got canceled.
Right.
It takes place in April usually. It got canceled right after March, and so I didn't get to attend. And so, but at the time, what they had booked for me was the hotel and Southwest flights. So I was like, "This is dope, right? This is great." The panty happened, and so I didn't get to go to the event. Well, last year they decided to open it up in November instead of April because at that point things were opening up. And by that point I had opened up the shop. I was already out in the public and stuff like that anyway. So I reached out to them and I said, hey, I was a scholarship winner in 2020, but because of the pandemic, I didn't get to attend. Is there any way that I could attend this year? And this was about 6 weeks, I think, before it was about to pop off, or maybe a month or so. And they're like, yeah, absolutely. So they booked all my stuff. And in this case, I had Frontier and Spirit. Never again. We can get into that on another episode too.
The Waffle House of the air.
So like they had to pay for me to have a bag and stuff like that, like to carry the bag on. They had to pay for me to carry the bag on. Yeah, they pay you. They dime you for everything. It's ridiculous. But that was at the Tropicana. I got flown in. I got to hang. I had no responsibilities. I just attended, and I was by myself, and I didn't really engage in people. I was also high anxiety because it was the first time I had traveled on a plane to go to a place like Vegas since the pandemic had happened. So I interacted when I wanted to, but I kept it pretty tight that time. I had some notes about inclusivity and diversity panels and stuff like that too, but for the most part I had a good run of it, enough that I thought like I would go again if it were free or cheap or something like that. If I can make it work, I'd go again. And then a couple months ago, I follow them still on all the social media, and they had posted something about how to moderate panels. And since that's something I'm getting into now, I had moderated panels at Comic Palooza here in Houston. I was like, yeah, let me take this little workshop. It might be helpful, right? Plus it's going to be queer based. I was like, this is way dope. And then maybe one day I can moderate a panel at Clexa. So I take the thing without reading the small print. What I did not realize at the time is that not only was it a workshop to learn how to moderate a panel, it was an audition to moderate. And I think it's probably better that I didn't know it.
Yeah, I think so too. Because I
just went in as my regular ass podcasting self, right? And so I did my little workshop, and at the end of the thing, she says, okay, everybody has a chance to like perform as a moderator real fast and come up with a question, ask a question of me, and I'll give you notes. So everybody got a chance to do that, and I was throwing my question together the last minute, and so people came prepared. That's the difference, is that people came prepared
and you were
with their question for the thing. I had to write it while people were talking.
This is professional. Don't show up prepared.
Don't show up prepared. This is the takeaway from this. But I am a podcaster, and not only that, I don't do a standard Q&A with my guests anyway. I always let the vibe. Like, I have some questions in the pocket in case things get weird, but I go off the vibe of my guests, and so I really kind of base things off of that. So I was nervous once I found out I was going to have to come up with a question, because usually I'm going off of whatever someone said. But I ended up going into something that was on brand for me. And I basically kind of prefaced my question with, as a person of color, I didn't experience a whole lot of representation growing up. I couldn't find my whole self as a Black, Japanese, and British American kid, that was also queer. I was not going to see myself on screen. But what I could do was find little nuggets of representation in different places that either empowered me or made me feel seen in some way, shape, or form. What for you as a queer, fill in the blank, whatever your deal is, were those little nuggets that you had, growing up to be represented and being empowered?
That's a really good personal question without being personal.
So that's exactly what she said, is that a lot of times moderators will ask this like super personal question, and it would make the person on the spot and be like, ooh, I don't know if I want to answer that question. But she said, you managed to ask a personal question without making it personal, because they can literally... They don't have to opt out. They can pick and choose. Like, they don't have to be too revealing. And they can, and stuff. And so she was like, no notes, moving on. So she moved to the next person, and I was like, no notes. No. So I was like the only person in that group that had no notes. Everybody else got a note.
You're that kid that sits in the front row.
Yeah, I was a total nerd. So I was so proud of myself. I was like, that's dope.
I'm proud of you.
So at the end of the call, she was like, hey, everybody, some of you are going to get emails in the next day or two to invite you to the thing. But the only criteria was that you had to already be kind of planning on going to Clexa, because they weren't paying for travel and stuff like that in this case. Because you're talking about 100 panelists.
No.
I mean, you're talking about like 100 panelists, all that kind of stuff. And so so it's mostly and that's actually pretty common for a lot of conferences. Conventions and stuff like that is usually the case, that like you get a free badge, and then maybe you get some kind of comp of some sort. And so I was anticipating that anyway. But when I got the invite, I think I hit you up and I was like, so I got to figure out how to get my ass to Anaheim in between DragonCon and podcast movement, because I'm going to be booked on things. And I wasn't going to know until about a week or two before how many events I was going to be booked on.
Right. But I'm financial backing.
But you're financial backing, you made it work.
You're mobile mouth Maybelline, and I'm...
So I was just like, oh, shit. And so I'm still getting used to that. And so for people who don't know our dynamic, although we have alluded to it, is that you are paying for travel and stuff, and I'm like doing a lot of the tech stuff.
She does all the work.
And then you and I talk about everything together. Plus you do a lot of research stuff. So like we're balancing it out in different things.
Yeah,
but like
you didn't want to do it my way, which was I pay for it and then you get to be the face. You're like, no, we're gonna do it together. I'm like,
yeah. And then you also are constantly saying you're not doing enough. And I'm always saying I'm not doing enough, because I'm undervaluing my podcasting and tech skill, and you're undervaluing your research and money part. And with our powers combined, we're both not doing enough and also doing everything. So it is what it is. So you helped me get there. You made it all possible. And so I was like, shit, how am I gonna do this? Because like there's still 2 days left of podcast movement, which I had already paid for that badge like long before we had decided to do this and stuff. So I'm like, I've already paid for most of this, but this is an opportunity that's actually going to elevate me. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes to the ClexaCon. So I ended up leaving a day early, 2 days early, so that I could get to ClexaCon. So what I did was I drove from Houston to Dallas, and I just stayed in Dallas driving up. And then I had to drive from Dallas to Houston late at night on Thursday so that I could fly out early Friday morning.
The next morning, I remember I was like,
yeah, because I got home at like 8 or something like that. And I had to like wash all my clothes, fold all my clothes, repack my shit, and get back in everything so I can go out. It was fine. It worked out. But I was pretty tired and everything. But it mostly worked out. And so Friday wasn't like too many duties, except that I had been invited to participate in a documentary that was being put on by Queer 26. And they were
I know them.
You follow them?
Yes, I do.
So I actually started following them.
Famous.
It's not that big a deal. I actually followed them because I had encountered them at Clexa the previous year. That's how I started following them. And so when I found out the Queer 26 was doing a documentary, I didn't even get for an description. I just reached like one of the organizers Stacy reached out to me, and she was like, we're asking a few people we really want to be in this doc if they'd be willing to do it. And I was like, yeah, sure. And then like a day later, I was like, hey, what's this about? But like for me, like I'm a person of service, right? So like they're like, hey, we want
this is how people get kidnapped. You need to stop.
Well, like, no, I mean, I felt like, Clexa was already providing me with all this opportunity. So I was like, for the way it was presented to me was like, they needed my help. And so I was like, oh, bet, like this is me being of service. And so they're like, yeah, it's a documentary about Clexa experience, like as a queer person, as a BIPOC person, what is it like to have a space like this? And then also because I was moderating, I was kind of repping for that side. And I was like, okay, dope. So my only requirement duty wise on that first Friday was to do my spot for the doc. You'll be proud of me. I put on a dress, like it's a little t-shirt dress, but it's still a big deal for me.
I bet you look cute.
I wore my Jordans because there's only one way for me to be.
You still look cute.
But I did my little spot, and I had to repeat a couple times just to make sure they had enough coverage for everything. And then I spent the rest of the day kind of in my hotel, like preparing myself for the next day, which is on that Saturday, I was the moderator for Bi Plus representation.
Okay.
And what I did not know was that they put us on the main stage, the big stage. I expected to be in the small stage.
You were in the center ring.
Yeah, we were in the center ring. And it was the biggest, the biggest room, the biggest space. And
I mean, you ain't famous.
The truth is, like, as a representative of the B plus line in the LGBTQ plus community, is that we're the largest growing population with the most variation, and yet we're either the least represented of all the LGBTQ plus people, or we're just straight up presented problematically.
Right.
We're the homewreckers,
is a thing, right?
There's the erasure part, and then there's just the predatory bisexual that is in so many things. And so for me to be surprised by I was like, oh shit, we're in the main room. That was a big deal, because to me that was Clexa acknowledging the fact that the Bi Plus population is the largest population of the LGBTQ plus community. So on my panel, I had Bi people, I had Pan people, I had Omni people, and none of these people I had met before. These were all. And
you were monitoring this panel. This was
I was the moderator of this panel, and they like Clexa did everything. I didn't have to put it together. I just had to show up. So when they reached out to me, they're like, we think you're best suited for these panels. And then I would say, yeah, I said, yes, absolutely to this. Yes, absolutely to this. This one, I will do some research on to see if I can figure this out. That's how it kind of went down. And then they sent me an assignment later. So I didn't have to find the guests. I didn't have to talk, I didn't have to do any of that. They did it for me.
This sounds very different, like rather than some of your other places that you've been to.
It's such a great position.
It seems everything is going to have something, because everything's going to go wrong, right? Like you can't plan for everything. You have to learn how to move and blah, blah. But this sounds very organized.
This was very organized and really thoughtful. And more than anything, like the organizer that I spoke to the most often, her name was Stacy. We were like chatting it up in the emails, in preparation for all this, because they had never done a comic book based, like there have been comic book creators and stuff, but they hadn't necessarily done a comic based panel. And so when I said, I'm a former comic book store owner, my podcast is this, whatever, blah, blah, blah. If there's anything comic related, definitely put me in for that. They basically built me a panel. And so the people that they put on the panel, one of which I was familiar with from the previous year, who was in a cartoonist panel, actually a cartoonist panel that became an accidentally polyamorous panel because everybody on the stage happened to be poly. So it's really awesome. I remember as soon as I saw that name, I was like, oh, I remember this person from last year. So they ended up creating this panel for me to moderate. And so on the first day I did Bi Plus in the big room, and we had great questions from the audience. We had a good
Are you allowed to say anybody
it.
that you interviewed? Or are you allowed to give out names, or they don't want
it's
you
mostly just that I have to remember the names.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot like that.
It was so many things.
Because it sounds like it's people from all walks of life and all nerddom. So it could be anything from a TV show to an animator.
There were stars from Batwoman there. There were stars from Clexa there. There was the people from the First Kill that's on Netflix, which I did end up watching beforehand. They were there. One of the girls looks like my ex, so like as much as I liked her character, it's also very hard to stare at her.
Nope.
Because she's pretty, but she's like a prettier version of my ex, I guess is what it was. Whatever.
That's basically we'll talk about that later. Internet, we're moving along. We're gonna
there was like some famous people
submit
there.
Questions.
But not as like Felicity Day wasn't there, which is like originally she wasn't there last year either, and that was my original poll was that she had a
baby.
I think she might have something like that.
And I'm pretty sure,
but
right now is probably annoying.
But yeah, like Queerly Beloved, the burlesque troupe was there. There was all kinds of folks that were there, and then my panel were just a bunch of creators. So one was on the bi panel. One is an actor and a content creator, a writer, Teresa Lee. There's an actor, Giovanni Espiritu. Actually, I kind of want to stalk her because she's so much fun. Like afterwards, I was like, I need to be your friend. So there was a number of people. Like I had
you need a bi kitty?
A bi kitty?
Yeah, that's you. You're gonna like. I'm not stalking you.
I'm a pet now.
I'm a pet.
I don't want to be someone's pet. I just want to kind of like be in stock with somebody and just like not actually have to see them.
Yes, she wants to be someone's pet, but on other situations, no,
I don't want to. No. Although there is a creator, maybe okay. There is a creator on the Tickety Talks that today I just realized that they were British, and I didn't realize that they were British before. And so he was playing 3 different characters in the skit that he was doing. And I said to my friend, I definitely want to be in a 4-way with this person with 3 of him, 3 him and 1 me.
I know who you were talking about.
So yeah, that was also like, because I'm not really on my boy kick at the moment. I'm kind of way past and over my boy kick, but then he brought it up and I was like, fuck, now I'm into boys again. It's fine. I'll get it.
It's okay. We all have,
we all have our slips. But yeah, so the bi panel went really well. We got to, I think the last minute someone got swapped out because I think one of the people ended up getting COVID, so they like swapped out a person to be on the stage with us or whatever. So we were talking about bi representation and all the different things. So like we had actors, we had writers, we had a casting agent.
How phenomenal.
Lisa Zambetti, I think her name was the casting agent. So like everybody that I had on there was like in a different aspect of being out there, being a creator of some sort. And then but we were talking about like how to incorporate bi-ness or B plusness in that thing. So it was really great. And then immediately after that, with no downtime, I went from being a moderator on the main stage to being a panelist on the main stage, because right after that was the queer BIPOC representation panel, which I was on.
Okay.
And that one was really great because first of all, there was 2 people on the panel that I had seen before and had followed them for a while. And so it was like, I'm going to share a stage with these people. And so now it's time for me to like reach out and connect because I've been traveling. And then there was a couple who I hadn't heard of before, but we were all in the industry in some way, shape, or form. I was kind of there representing the podcasters. There was like a couple channel, YouTube channel content creator. There was a producer. There was a person who was an organizer of getting BIPOC people booked into higher positions in the entertainment business.
I'm really liking how they planned this.
We definitely need to go together.
I would really enjoy this.
You would have really loved it, and I understand why you're not traveling right now. But I think when you are comfortable to travel, Clexa is something I definitely want to experience with you, because for me, I feel like it's my annual thing now. Like I don't know how I won't go unless I can't afford to.
It just sounds like they really took a very conscious choice on finding, because how you would do like casting, how do you cast for, bi characters? How do you write for bi characters? How do you remember? How do you write books? How do you do this?
The casting agent one was really cool, because what she was saying was like, if the character, like that people would come to her, because technically you can't put all of this stuff in a casting description, right? And it'd be like, this person, like, we kind of want, what you can't put in there is we want an actual bisexual to play this role. But what you can say is the vibes need to be right. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So then, since she can't directly ask, like, are you a bisexual person? She could say different things to try to get the vibes right, so that even if on camera this person is never tapped as a bisexual person, that the vibes push through, that kind of thing. So she had some interesting stuff to say. Actually, that reminds me, there was also a romance writer who does women loving women content. Okay. And her name was Melissa. I forget her last name.
Can you show, is any of this stuff recorded and you can watch it somewhere?
It is recorded, but it's not available to the public. I have reached out to ask, like, how many clips can I share of, within my thing, just to get kind of, tease you out. Because the other part is, I've done some things that I'm really proud of. I said some things I'm really proud of that I would kind of like to put out there. So I'm just waiting for that response. But yeah, they gave us all a chance to download. Oh, actually, I still need to download 2 of them, but
and I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but does this con offer, like, how a lot of people, because for various reasons can't travel, can't afford to go to a
They do have a virtual version of it.
So they do have a virtual?
You could buy the virtual version, which started because of the pandemic. But when I was talking to Stacey, I was like, I'm glad that you kept that up, because even though people are traveling, like, if anything, it's taught us that there's people who want to participate, but they can't come.
Like people with disabilities or autoimmune issues that can't take that risk.
Yeah.
Or
and so
maybe you're working or something.
I mean, even DragonCon had a virtual as well, cool. Like a virtual pass. And so, but there was also some events that were only virtual. So like, I wanted to go see Jim Starling, which is a creator of Thanos and stuff, but he was only on a virtual thing. Okay. So short of me paying extra so that I could also get the virtual badge. So that's the other part, is you don't get both. Oh. You get one or the other. Oh. How much is it? Cons are doing that. Off the top of my head, I don't know, but most cons are doing a version of that. So like last year, I bought a virtual pass to New York Comic Con so that I could watch some of the panels while I was traveling. So I was actually traveling to ClexaCon last year and watching New York Comic Con on my downtime. And then this year I'm actually going to New York Comic Con. So
yes, you are.
So ClexaCon again.
That seems like a great one. It seems like it was for accessibility.
Accessibility was great. There was a lot of options.
Intersectionality sounds like spot on.
And it's just, it's just fun to. Last year there were mermaids because there was a swim party. This year, I don't know if I got there when there was a pool party. I didn't go to it, but there's like queer karaoke. There's all kinds of things that they do. The burlesque show and stuff like that. So
I would have gone
for
to
me,
the burlesque show. Yeah, I would have done that.
ClexaCon is going to always be a thumbs up, because they also gave me they empowered me as a moderator in a way that I haven't experienced in other places before.
That it sounds like they took a lot of the pain out of and worry And then therefore you could flow easier.
Yeah, because that was the problem. Like they specifically, like they said, like, send us the things that you're comfortable talking on.
Okay.
I sent those things. I was originally going to be interviewing the person who plays Poison Ivy on the new Batwoman TV show, Bridget Regan, but unfortunately it was booked around the time that my flight was happening for me to go to the airport. So I was like, it was going to be too tight.
Too close.
Like I could have done it, but I think it would have been too tight and I would have been stressed out. And I don't think I would have. So what I said to them is like, I don't think I can give my best self to Bridget on stage, even if I'm going to have, which she deserves, because I'm going to be worried about this like 15-minute window between the time it ends to the time I need to start going through.
And we all know how cons are. It's hard to get. You're like, oh yeah, I'll just get out the door. No, that's not how that works.
Because even when I did end my thing, I was trying to still get out and just get out a little bit early. I was like probably an extra hour early by that point. But the amount of times I got stopped in the hallway. So that's actually something that was a different experience for me, is that I'm trying to get out of the hotel, like get back to the room, get my shit, check out so I can get my lift. And I got stopped in the hallway by someone that's like, could tell they were really like introverted, because I didn't get their pronouns, so I don't know. They were really introverted, and they were like, sorry, can I just stop you for a second? Like, I just want to say that like everything you said yesterday on the queer BIPOC thing was incredible, and I'm just glad I got a chance to see you, to say just like thank you for talking, and okay, bye. And then I was trying to be like, thank you, you want to take a picture, whatever. They were just like, peace. And I get it, like the ambivert in me is like, I can turn it on when I need to, but when I want it off, I want it off. And so it was probably a lot for them to just be like,
maybe you have a new follower somewhere on Instagram or something.
I don't know.
And then we could be like, hey, if that's you, reach out. We would love to chat with you.
So that actually did happen a couple of times, but that one in particular, the person that stopped me there, it was just like, I was just like, me? I got
a little misty. I like that.
So it was
that's why you want, this is why you do it. Yes, I want to talk about my things that
I want to talk about this stuff, but I do want to impact.
You want to uplift somebody. Yes. And I think there is something to be said when someone looks at you and says, you help me feel validated.
Yeah.
There's something magical in that statement in any of its forms. But anyway, sorry. Okay.
Yeah. So that was great. So I'll admit I was not ready for Clexa to end. Whereas last year, because I was filled with so much anxiety, I kind of was ready for it to end. But this year, and then kind of dealt with later on, of like, that was fun. I enjoyed being there.
Well, last year was no vaccines, right? This year was.
So I was vaccinated when I left. I was trying to get boosted, but I didn't get boosted in time. I wasn't available until after I came back. So I actually didn't get my boost until right after I came back.
The last
year. Okay. This year, I have 4 times.
This pandemic feels like we're just.
I know. Who knows? Like this year, I got 4. Like as of now, I'm sitting on 4 shots. If they were still doing the boosting, which I can't seem to tell if they are. I'm almost eligible.
They just released one while you were doing your traveling that just said that they're going to be allowing another one that's going to be specific to the Omicron 4 and 5, the one that's kind of kicking everybody's ass right now.
That one I don't have yet.
Yeah, I need that one too.
And to be honest, I need to, like, I'm so surprised I haven't gotten it yet, given how much I've been out in the air and on the streets.
Who knows? You may have had it and you just don't know it.
Maybe.
You just don't have any, but let's see. We're just going to knock on wood. Yeah. And
I probably should have taken one of the home tests when I got home just as a check, but like I didn't have symptoms, so nothing triggered it. And I'm trying to hold on to those tests until I know.
And to be fair, these tests are not, they're for the ones the old one, not the new ones that live in different parts of the
right.
So when it comes to ClexaCon, I know that cons can't control everything, but I'm hoping that because they seem so thoughtful with their planning. But would you find, again, you're not disabled, but
for mobility,
you're trying to keep things open. How did you find things?
So I try to be really aware of the mobility aspects of disability, mostly because it's something we've been talking about for what your future might look like. And, there's other people in my life that is an issue for them as well. In my case, I think I have like a couple invisible type of disabilities that were triggered a few times throughout the course of this, but specifically for mobility, one thing, like they kept very wide aisles.
Okay.
In terms of, and then they had sort of I don't know if it was necessarily designated or if this is just kind of how it happened, that wheelchair folks were sort of in the front
Good.
of everybody, you know, front of the last chair, I guess.
Good.
The hotel itself didn't necessarily have enough benches, I would say. So like if you were walking with a cane and maybe you got tired, because there was times like my feet were killing me, and because I have really bad I have fallen arches and really jacked up ankles, so I want to sit pretty regularly, you know. And I would say that for me there wasn't necessarily enough seating walking down a hallway versus like being in the area where they were, there was. You know what I'm saying?
So in the con area, that's what I'm hearing you say, but on getting places,
so like because I was in so this was at the Anaheim Marriott, and I was in a tower that was far away from the thing, so I had to like wiggle through one tower to get to the other side and stuff like that. And so by the time I would get to the other side, I'd be like, man, I'd cross through the lobby and be like, I'm gonna sit here for a minute, and then get up and like, you know, go to the next, you know, thing. That's because
they had good wheelchair. I mean,
most
elevators.
They had elevators and everything like that. And I think the problem with what was weird about Anaheim Marriott is that you select your floor in the lobby. So when you go into the elevator, you don't have buttons. You don't have buttons inside the elevator, which is actually kind of terrifying. I did not realize how scary that was, because what if I'm in there with people and I'm uncomfortable and I want to jump off the elevator, you know, off the thing. So yeah, when you go through the elevators, like when you're waiting outside the elevator, that's where the numbers are, and that's where you press what floor you want to be on, which I thought was weird.
I am wondering if they're trying to avoid those people that hit all of them.
Maybe. The thing is like it wasn't so crowded that like I ever had an issue where it's like, oh, there's too many people plus also wheelchair, you know, which that did happen in Atlanta though. Because we're talking about 100,000 people in Atlanta, whereas I don't know what the attendance of ClexaCon is, but I'll say that there's one big room plus the exhibition hall plus two I think it's only two conference rooms, smaller conference rooms, and then they have breakout session rooms, right? So it's not it's not a huge con, but it's very specific to its audience.
So like, did they have downtime places or quiet places for people maybe who are on the spectrum?
So that is actually not something that I was aware of, and I would have to check. But I will say that references something I did want to talk about. And another thing is, a couple years ago, I went to the Geek Girl Con. When I said about ClexaCon, this is the difference between when women and non-binary femmes are involved in planning. Geek Girl Con in Seattle has a quiet room, and it's a large room. So you can stand wherever and not necessarily be right next to people.
Okay, good.
And you could just shut it down. And when I saw that, I was like, this is the coolest fucking thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's so thoughtful.
Yeah. I really wish Disneyland did things like that.
I wish every place fucking had these places, to be honest. Like, even in the airport, there's times like I walked so far away from my gate to find a little patch. And this is when I was in Santa Ana airport, to find a little booth and table or something where I could just be by myself. And I put my headphones on because they're sound counseling. And even still, it was just like, oh, there's still fucking people, you know, like, it would have been nice to be able to have a quiet spot. But so that I'm not aware of. It doesn't mean they don't have it. I just didn't see it. But if it's anything, I would suggest it definitely for every con to have it. And for something as big as DragonCon, I guess they're assuming most people would go up to their rooms. But like, I didn't stay at the hotels, you know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because like not everybody stays at your hotels.
Yeah, and some people like drive in from LA or whatever or something like that. So yeah, I would have to check on that, but that's not something I noticed this time around. But
okay.
Oh, the other part is that they did require vaccination, and or a doctor's note to say why you couldn't. And so you would get a actually it fell down, but you would get a wristband that you so I just had it like attached to my thing like this, you know, to indicate that you are a vaccinated person. or that you were approved,
Right.
so that you didn't have to worry about.
And I'm assuming then if you weren't vaccinated, you had to wear a mask.
Everybody was encouraged to wear a mask, and then all the microphones had microphone panties on them.
Good.
But so one thing I would say is the microphone panties, I wish they had given us some so that we could put our own, on.
That's smart. Maybe that's a good feedback for them.
Maybe that's a note for the future. But yeah, because sometimes they weren't there, so they're like some people were raw dogging their mics and some people weren't, and if they had to share, blah blah blah. So that would have been one thing. But yeah, all in all, it was like even in the exhibition hall was pretty wide space walk-through spaces. So like if you were moving through with, and I will say that some of the wheelchairs that I saw at the event were the really large base ones, the electric ones that really had some
mobile, oomph to it,
the big battery pack and all that kind of stuff to it. And in those cases, especially in the exhibition hall, you weren't looking for people getting hemmed up. Mostly people would part, and the aisles were big enough that you didn't really have to worry too much about. So I would say that in terms of physical accessibility from an observer who's looking for it, I felt it was present. As a person who's not sitting in that position, I would definitely probably ask if they also agree with that. But it definitely looks better than most things I've gone to. And since I go to a lot of conventions, I'm pretty aware of like how difficult.
I wonder if there's a way we can ask these questions using like certain hashtags, like in trying to find people, like maybe on Twitter and something. Hey,
maybe.
What did you guys do? You guys mind giving us what you guys thought from your perspective? That would be nice.
Yeah. So, it was kind of hard to leave. I wasn't quite ready to go. And in hindsight, given, I think I did the right thing though, booking the flight when I was, because there was only awkward times to get from, and this one I had to do connecting flights because there wasn't direct from Houston to Santa Ana. I didn't get home until 1 a.m. So it was a very long travel day for me. And no matter what, it would have been that. Even if I left on Monday, it would have been as long a travel day, but it just would have been earlier maybe. But then that would have shortened my time of being home and resting, because I had 2 days. I had only 2 days between ClexaCon and DragonCon. And in addition to that, I had to prep cosplay, which I only kind of half-assed did, to be honest, because I was so tired by this point. Plus a week, I was going to be there for 8 days, or 7.5 days. So it was just like, I needed to pack a lot. I needed to get a lot done. I'd gotten my nails done with the powder. These 2 fingers have popped off, even though it's powder. So it's like my fingernail, but it's powder. But these popped off, even though it's been less than 2 weeks, whatever. I did stuff like that. Like I got my nails done. I, got waxed. I did all that other kind of stuff. And then I packed and I washed clothes.
We're taking our motto seriously. Okay.
I know. Yeah, absolutely.
Waxed
and fully packed. Speaking of being waxed, I'm waiting to hear back as to when I'm hoping that I am eligible for a monkeypox vaccine through an organization here in Houston called the Normal Anomaly. I know some of the organizers, and I didn't use my cloud of knowing them. I just applied their regular application. So we'll see if I'm one of the ones that get. Plus, they know me by my performative name and not my government name, so they might not even know it's me if it's popping up anyway. So I'm not using cloud for
government name.
Right. But yeah, so then 2 days of packing and getting myself ready, and still didn't feel ready. And now we go to Atlanta.
And now we are in the Dragon of the Con. Okay.
The Dragon of the Con. So with Atlanta, again, I had this booked back in January. And so this is the one trip I did pay for travel wise, but you supported me with like logistics, lift money and all that other kind of stuff.
I think we did some extra food
and things. Yeah. And to be honest,
everything's gone up in price. Yeah.
Everything got so expensive that while on my budget for everything, I was accounting for some stuff, but not to the degree that everything was actually costing. Yeah. So that was something. And between Dallas and ClexaCon, I think I budgeted like $400 for just like expense related things. All of that shit was gone. And so I thought I was going to be able to stretch that into Dallas or Atlanta, and I couldn't.
I got 2 burgers yesterday with 2 fries, a small milkshake, and a large milkshake.
$30.
$31 from Wawa.
Nailed it. Yeah. Yeah, so things are getting crazy expensive. So again, DragonCon, same thing, about $400, and I came in like slightly under budget until I needed to take a lift home from Houston Airport to Dallas, and that scooped that all up because unfortunately I came home at a time that Tree was working, and it was
Well, and guys, side note, you want to think that freaked us out the most in all these travels? Nobody has microwaves anymore in their hotel rooms.
So this is a mixed bag. Best Western is what I stayed in Dallas. So I originally had a room scheduled at the Sheraton that the event was happening at. But then I was like, you know what? That's going to be sensory overload.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to not want to be around. So I want to go. I like Best Westerns, and I really wanted a microwave. So I booked it without reading this fine print because I know Best Westerns always have microwaves. Turns out not true. So they didn't have a microwave. I missed the breakfast the first day. Like all the things that I usually use a Best Western for, I didn't actually get to experience. Except for one day I did the breakfast. And then the second trip I was at Anaheim Marriott, and that one was just logistically the best option because of to travel in Anaheim, everything has a markup because it's near the parks. So everything, like I'll put it like this, the room itself for 3 nights, I think was $420 or something like that. But the resort tax that's attached to it was $200 and something. Yeah. So and then the lifts all had premiums on them because you're traveling to the resort areas. So that's why that trip was so expensive, because you're talking about the resort. So it was the most logistically sound thing to do, to stay in the same hotel. And given that I was like a mile away from my room to where the actual part of the conference was within that same hotel, like it was such a long walk to get from where I was sleeping to where the conference part was. It was just the smartest thing to do. In Atlanta, though, I did 2 things. I ended up staying one night early. I ended up booking, and I ended up adding a day to my trip because I have a bunch of friends in Atlanta that I don't know in person. So at ClexaCon, there was 2 people I knew, but I hadn't seen them in a few years. We were part of the Women in Media organization. I know the executive director of that, so I had met her for lunch and stuff like that. And there was another friend that's a member of that I was also supposed to meet, but we both got busy, so we saw each other, but we didn't get to talk. Atlanta, though, I went a day early so that I can hang out with a friend of mine that I've known from the internet for a long time. And we went to like the Braves Stadium area, not the Braves Stadium itself, but the area is called the Battery. We went to Fat Tuesdays, and which is just a daiquiri. It's like a hot dog on a stick, but just for daiquiris.
Yes.
They have these in Texas too, but I never stop at them. But yeah, so Fat Tuesdays, Atlanta. Yeah. Now it's my favorite cup. It's what I'm drinking.
Didn't you do Slutty Vegan?
I did Slutty Vegan also. So I specifically booked my Airbnb where I booked it because it was close to a Slutty Vegan.
I want to try it.
It's very good. So the first day I was at the Battery, and I got to see like Atlanta Braves Stadium. There was a game playing, but I was just walking around the area with my friend. I had some bomb ass hot wings and stuff like that, and some empanadas. And then I went back so I was staying in a hotel, just like a Holiday Inn or whatever. That I don't recall if that one had a microwave.
It did not.
It didn't.
You were very disappointed because you're trying to save money, so you go to the store to
like I can get food,
or you like to order food and then have leftovers, and
because it takes me so long to finish one meal. Like I eat frequently, but I eat like a bird when I'm eating, and it's not something I would rather eat more, but I don't, and so I want to be able to stretch my meal out, and this made it impossible to stretch my meal out, and I was only there for one day, so this is the bringing back the putting a pin in it. At the breakfast that they had, I was sitting next to the table next to an old couple, and the guy was just like, stuff like that. And so I do like an obvious gesture of just like, like this kind of a thing. And we make eye contact, but this phases him not at all. So I pack up all my food. I put a napkin over my food. I pack everything up. I get up and I start to walk away. And he goes, "You don't have to move." And I just look back at him, like, I don't address it. I just look back at him like, bitch. And then I sat as far away as possible at a solo table and then uncover my food and finish my food. But at that point, I also didn't really feel my food anymore because it's just like, ugh, so nasty.
And he does that. He wasn't covering his mouth?
No, nobody covers their mouth anymore. I think the bad side of the pandemic is that everybody who was wearing masks forgot that you're supposed to cover your mouth. So everybody raw dogs the planet.
No, I'm horrible. I'll be in a mask and I cough into my shirt.
I do too. I'll have a mask and I got my elbow like Obama taught us, and I'm just like, you know. You remember he had that whole campaign
yes,
about coughing
I do. I forgot until this moment. But
I always say that. I was like, I cough into my elbow like Obama taught us. As if I wasn't doing that forever before. But yeah, I still do that. But yeah, everybody's just like, yeah.
God, other countries must be absolutely disgusted by us when we go to visit.
It sucks.
Like then, in Japan, like
less than 1,000 cases that first year.
Okay.
It's ridiculous. But then after that, I had an Airbnb set up, which I had booked and paid for way back in January.
Yes, we had planned for that. Yeah.
And so I transferred over. So I ended up paying for that little one night at the Holiday Inn, and then I had already paid 6 months ago. I had already paid for the Airbnb. So that was nice to not have the stress of it, to just be like, this trip is mostly paid for.
And the Airbnb had a full kitchen. I remember that.
Yeah, it was a very nice spot. But yeah, it was a cute little like 1-bedroom spot. So it had like, as soon as you walked in, there was like the kitchen was like along one wall, all stainless steel appliances, all gas, all nice.
It looked like it had everything you needed.
Very big fridge and freezer. It was great. So I got like groceries the first day, and that's kind of how I handled breakfast and snacks and stuff. And then, I did go to Slutty Vegan that first day I got into the loft. And then after that, I would either eat at the hotels during the event because it was just easier to eat there. Or once I got back, I did order some ramen from a place while I was there, and then I spread that over a couple of days, so it was nice. It was nice because it was peaceful. I mean, I was really close to a firehouse or whatever, but it was my own space. I didn't have to worry about DragonCon people and stuff, although the people who were in the adjacent loft also were there for DragonCon, so you would see them in the hallway or whatever. But very nice exposed brick type of place, all furnished and refurbished and stuff. The bathroom was weird because it's a shower stall bathroom, but it was elevated, so you have to step up and then step up into the shower.
Okay.
For
right, good
accommodation an issue. Yeah. The other part is it had a sign next to it that says only one person in the shower at one time. And I started laughing because I was just like, they just want to take the fun out of the shower. But when you step in, you immediately knew why.
No, you're like, nope. Okay. We get it.
Because like it was like one of those shower kits that have like that prefab thing. And so when you stepped, you would hear it giving. And so whatever their plumbing situation is, that was the reason why they built it up.
Would have been like, I'm sorry, I guess I'm going to be cleaning myself in the sink.
And though you could hear it, like you could just hear like rinse when you're washing and stuff like that. So, so in terms of like accommodation, the shower situation would not be that, but the bathroom was still, it was a long skinny bathroom with the toilet on one side, the sink in the middle, and the shower on the other. So in terms of space, it was fine. But if you have a mobility issue, that shower would not be.
If you needed like a walk, you needed something to sit on. If you need, getting
right,
up in
like you wouldn't have had that available to you. Yeah. The other thing, like in the hotel that I stayed in, the Holiday Inn, like the toilet was so close to the tub, you wouldn't have been able to really squeeze in if you had a kid or something like that too. And that's actually kind of the case of a lot of the hotels. Like where we're saying, like at the Best Western or a Holiday Inn kind of level, like they are usually not that spacious of bathroom situations. So you would have to request one of the accessibility rooms.
Okay.
Which I have been debating about whether or not to book those rooms because I want to be able to evaluate them on account of the show and for people. But then when I'm about to book it, I'm like, what if someone needs this room? And so then I pull myself out of it. So like if we were to travel together, I think maybe I would feel better about that,
And then, because for everybody to know, like, I think that, I bought a cane and I'm learning how to walk with it. And you would think, I don't know why I thought, it's a learning process that I'm like, oh, I'm just going to walk with it. No,
Yeah,
it's
I
a
walked on a
conscious
cane for a
memory
while.
of
It was
like,
very difficult
yeah.
to, because I felt like when I had to walk on a cane for a period of time, it was just like I would walk with it, and then Tree would go, "That's not how you walk." Like
You
he's like,
walk
"You don't
with
even
it.
look like you're using it to stable yourself." And I'm like, I literally don't know
I don't
how
know
to
what
do
I'm
this.
doing. And you would think, I know how to walk and I don't know how to do it with it.
Like,
But
so now I
occasionally,
understand why people go for a full
full,
walker
full
sometimes,
on.
because then you have it on both sides of
Right.
support. But yeah,
And
you do have to learn how to walk with a cane.
I've had so many injuries that I ended up just buying a wheelchair. I know that sounds crazy, but when you rent
I used
them,
to have a
guys,
wheelchair when I messed
yeah,
up my knee.
they're like
I was in
$50 a day, or 20, even if it's $10 a day, that's
So
$10
back
a
in the
day.
day when I injured myself skydiving, and I was on crutches for a long time, but I worked at Dell and I was a manager of facilities, so I had to check every building. I ended up getting a wheelchair on Craigslist for $50.
Yeah.
First of all, it was wet and stayed wet the entire time. Like the gel cushion, it was one of those just regular ass, like the ones that they have at the airport or whatever. I used it for work because I couldn't get from building to building. So I would have my staff push me around. So I did have a wheelchair for 6 weeks. I could push it, but I couldn't push it that far. So I would get people to push it for me.
I have one that I bought on Amazon for $150. Brand new. And it's the boxed one. It's nothing fancy schmancy.
But there might be times when it is more
when
helpful for you.
when I might need it. And I mean, I ended up keeping it also because, like, one, it was cheaper than renting one. And also because of the nature of my business, which is I train dogs. I know that sounds crazy, guys. Like, what does that have to do with
you could be randomly hurt.
I could be randomly hurt. And then also, my hard lesson learned with all of this is this major disabling event called the pandemic.
Yeah.
Dogs got to get used to being around wheelchairs.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. It's
so
a training tool.
it was a training tool because they don't want to get close to anything. And I want my clients who maybe are in a wheelchair to be able to have a way of walking their dog.
Right. No, that's smart. See, this is the thing, is like the pandemic taught us a lot about accessibility in a way that, like,
I would hope,
like, you don't realize how ableist you are. And I know this is one of the conversations. Maybe we'll do a different episode on this, but there's a conversation you and I had recently where you're like, now that you have the diagnosis you have, once you got the diagnosis that you got, and you kind of understand what your future might be looking like, you're having to address your own ableism.
Yeah.
And and I've been actively trying to address this for a number of years now, and when like, even with that mentality in place, when I miss something, I'm like, oh my God, like, it's so easy to not be aware.
Right. Well, because everything in our society is at a sight, out of mind. And I know I always bring up Amani, Crutches and Spice, but ugly laws, literally that's what they're called. Ugly laws didn't go away until the 70s.
Yeah.
And they're making a comeback because of all this shit.
Yeah, I know, because I used to work as a facilities manager, like I said, at Dell, and so ADA compliance and all that kind of stuff was a big part of the job that I did. And so even with that mentality, like having to be aware of spaces because of the nature of the position that I had, still years later, I'll catch myself on something and I'll be like, fuck, like, I didn't realize that. The only time the reason why I think I started paying more attention, and unfortunately I think this is a very human thing, is when I got hurt skydiving and I was on crutches / and a wheelchair, I also traveled during that time. And so traveling while on crutches is very difficult. I can only imagine while traveling with a wheelchair, especially one of those very heavy ones where they literally take you out of your chair and put you into a crappy chair so that they can check your chair.
And then break your chair.
And like the anxiety that I would imagine having when you have to get rid of your comfort, because it's literally the way you move around. And I'm comfortable in the chair that I'm sitting in at my desk, and I don't want to sit in a different chair for my desk, let alone this is the way I move around the world. And now you're taking it and putting it under the plane. So when I traveled with crutches, I got into the airport, and this is 10, 12 years ago. Someone immediately, I didn't even check in as needing it. Someone just rolled up on me as soon as I got into the airport, put me in a chair, wrapped up everything and like, we were going. So we got priority booking and all this other kind of stuff. So that kind of stuff was very nice and helpful. But then getting off the plane sucked because you had to wait until everybody got off the plane. Yeah. So that because they insisted you got wheelchaired in, you getting wheelchaired out. And I was like, I could crutch up there. And they're like, no, this is how we do it.
A liability. I think it's more for liability for themselves. They do not.
I understand that. Yeah.
But you learned the hard way that the world does not care about you.
Yeah. And so with that in mind, I started to try. I think I was a more active.
Right.
I was paying attention more actively. And yet again, I will still miss things on occasion. So that's something I'm trying to be very observant of when I'm doing these traveling, because part of what we're talking about in this marginalization of travel, what happens if they break your chair and now you're in a country that is not your country.
Right. We do everything, even though America does have the ADA, which is a hell of a lot more than other countries. A lot of countries have. I wouldn't say they were fucking advanced.
No.
By any stretch of the means. Because many things are based on three different, mostly everything that happens in the United States and beyond when it comes to disabilities is it places the responsibility on the disabled person to figure out how to get shit to move around or how to adapt.
Yeah.
Which is fine. It's been like, well, why not? Like, they're an individual. They're allowed to come up with something. Yeah. Okay. I get that. But then, simple things like people don't consider those, the having wheelchair access on a sidewalk.
Yeah. Because they'll put bushes or trees,
or they'll block them, or they'll cop cars will park in front of them, all sorts of stuff. But the first one is individual. The second one is societal, where society will come in and try to help make some changes, which is awesome. But the ideal one would be universal. When you're planning shit.
Yes.
You want to plan something that keeps everybody in mind.
Yeah.
Because if I was there's a new friend on TikTok, her name is Claudzilla, and I freaking love her and I can't wait to have her on a show. But she was in a car accident and is near, God believe it. And one of her hands, she can't, this is something that a lot of us take for granted. She cannot do this.
I mean, I struggle with opening things on occasion, and I don't have.
So why do we design bottles where only certain people can use them? Jeez. Or the other one someone said is, Shae, why don't you just buy a different type of bottle that is easier for you? Okay, that's fair. I don't have an example here, but we'll just.
But if you're at the quick stop picking up some water real quick,
one, accessibility might not be there, but the other thing is this bottle of water costs $1.25. This bottled water costs $5, but I can easily open it. But it's $5.
Yeah.
So these are the things that I want. Again, part of the show is us discussing why aren't we aren't we planning things with a larger group of people involved?
Because you have the black tax, you have the woman tax, you have the pink tax, or I guess that's the pink tax.
Pink tax is the woman tax.
You got the queer tax, the rainbow tax, and then disabled tax. I don't know if they've got a clever name for it or anything like that, but literally anybody from marginalized groups has to pay a premium on the things that we generally just kind of need.
Right.
Or want or reflect something that's comfortable for us,
right.
One of the things, just where I live in the 3rd ward of Houston, which is a historically Black community. It's a food desert though.
Yeah.
So I actually drive over to the queer part of town to go to the closest grocery store. And because it's in the queer part of town, it's got produce. It's, everything's great about that place, whatever. The same type of grocery store, HEB, there is one that is not in my neighborhood directly, but further on the outskirts of the neighborhood that most of the people from this neighborhood bus or, get dropped off or whatever to go to. Lot less produce. The quality of the produce is a lot worse, things like that.
And you have to pay more for it.
And you have to pay more for it. So this is just where I live right now.
Yes.
And I have a privilege in that I have a car and I can afford to drive that car which is really only the difference of probably 2 blocks further.
Yeah.
in distance.
But if you were in a wheelchair, 2 blocks is a big freaking deal.
Yeah. And if you had to get on a bus, I don't think that street has very frequent buses, so many things like that. So like you are kind of pushed to go to the other one if you need stuff, but it's just it's just so difficult. And that's just where I live. Right. Now you compound that with, I'm going to an airport. I have a wheelchair that weighs a ton, or half ton or something like that. I know that some of them can be quite heavy. Like
they're quite heavy. Some depending on what they do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That on top of, I have to at some point surrender it. So that other people.
And I want everybody here to interrupt Sharmane again, but I want everybody here to go, when we say like surrender my wheelchair, I'm surrendering my legs. I'm surrendering legs, my independence.
Actually this did happen at DragonCon. DragonCon, I think, spaced things out as much as they could, given that there again 100,000 people. This is the largest con I have ever been to. It's spread out over 5 different venues, multiple floors. Some of the hotels are joined by skywalks and some aren't. So there's street walking, there's skywalk walking, but there's also just people fucking everywhere. Yeah. And I think again they spaced things out as much as they could, but it was really up to the people that were in attendance to pay attention to when someone was coming, or they would be shouting out like part the floor, whatever. At one of the panels that I attended, one of the panelists was in a wheelchair. He did have a standing type of wheelchair where he could get himself propped up, but all the panel was on a dais, like a stage that was built up, and it was a small room, but they built all the stages up for the most part so that everybody could see. That being said, they didn't have a ramp for the guy who was on the panel. So he had enough mobility to where he got himself out of the chair and laid on the stage, rolled himself over, and then got propped up so that he could sit in the chair, because they were just going to put his wheelchair on the ground near the dais and hand him a mic. And he was like, no. So he did that himself. Like he got himself onto the stage. He popped himself up on the table. And then when he was done, he rolled himself off. He got in, he needed some assistance to get into his chair. But then it's a standing chair. So he could stand when he took pictures with people. He would stand, but he was in the chair with the support. So he had one of those type of like very large things. And it put him in the position. And so at one point, the moderator said, I'm sorry, everybody, for the delay because this wasn't planned very well. And I think what she was addressing was like the con didn't accommodate the moderator, but it sounded like he got here late. We're going to do the best we can.
Right.
Get him up on stage. Right. And he didn't seem to be bothered by it. And part of what he talked about was like, as a cosplayer, learning to cosplay while being in a wheelchair and accommodating his wheelchair or adjusting his cosplay for his wheelchair and everything like that, was that it's part of what keeps him in as good of health as he is in.
Sure.
Because he if he sits and he's idle, he will deteriorate. So he builds.
If you don't use it, you lose it, right?
Right. So he's using cosplay as a defense against the further deterioration based off of the disability that he currently has. But it also put him in a position where he literally had to throw himself out of his own chair, roll onto the stage, and get propped up into a chair just so he could be at eye level with everybody else on the dais, Yeah. So I think there should have been people in attendance there knowing what panels he was in, to be in that room, to be like a handler or something like that, to also accommodate getting him up on stage in a way that wasn't so like, hold on, everybody.
Yeah, everyone's staring, and
because the other part is you had to travel from such distances that they were delayed because they were trying to get through a skywalk from one hotel to the other, right? And those skywalks in the middle of the day would be so jam packed, it would take you like a half an hour to get through them. When if no one was there, it would take.
And that's with walking where you can bob and weave. You're not in a wheelchair.
And so like, and the other part is like when wheelchairs would try to pass down the middle, there wasn't even necessarily room enough for the 2 tiers of people plus, going through. And that's just the skywalk. That's just the logistics of the architecture of the building. Right. So things like that, like and so I think like for a con as large as DragonCon, offering a virtual option is really great because it might be a really big fucking hassle to try to get yourself ready to travel into Atlanta. That being said, if you do still want to attend and you want to be there and stuff like that, it is possible. I saw a number of people maneuvering this way. I just know that every single person dealt with something during the course of that. Because even just like walking into the hotels, the bottleneck that would happen.
Oh, I'm
when
sure.
you're, what I'm saying, at the doors, and then you have to be seen. You have to have someone has to see your badge, and all that kind of stuff. So I imagine there was a lot of stuff people were dealing with, and then plus like you would try to get on an elevator, and someone would be in a wheelchair and have to back out or back in, and there was just times when I would see people and I'd be like, I'll take the next one because I didn't want to put them out. But then I don't know that me saying I'll take the next one doesn't make them feel like I don't want to be in this with you because you're in a wheelchair and that's heavy and there's all these people. But it was really just literally like people were saying like, let them back out a little so that you can come in. I'm not going to put a person out like that.
Yeah.
I'll just wait for the next elevator.
I can't wait. One great insight will be have Quadzilla. And again, she's not the ambassador of all of which who live in wheelchairs, but she can give a perspective.
She can give a perspective that
of saying, hey,
have.
this might be a better way of wording it, or this might be a better way of handling it.
Well, yeah, because one of the things that of people I follow on Twitter, and this started a couple years ago, I had a guest on a show who is a disabled advocate and an activist and things like that, and we were talking on Bi Furious about different laws that accommodate not just disabled people, but queer people, and how those intersections of that thing affects this person, right? And because of that person, I started following all these people that they recommend, and the amount of times I see a tweet about, please don't put your hand on my wheelchair, please don't push me. Like I'm in the grocery store, I'm trying, and someone just pushes my chair away so that they can grab a can of beans, and they don't even think about it as furniture, but it's literally an extension of my body.
My body.
And for me, like, it would never occur, like even in my most ableist that I could possibly be, it would never occur to me to put my hands on somebody's wheelchair, because I would assume that is feeling like a violation of their body. Like I don't even think I ever thought about it. All I know is that when I've seen as many tweets as I have now seen over 3 years of following so many people based off of this one person, how many of them post this, and then you read the comments and they're like, yep, happens all the time, or it has or the way that people will like bend over and talk to them like in baby talk, or like there's so many things that happens to them. It's just like they are regular ass people. They just happen to have a different mobility situation than you.
They just do things something different than you. That's it.
And one story was really horrible. A person was in line in their wheelchair at the grocery store. A person grabbed their wheelchair, pulled them back, got in front of them in line, scooched their stuff back on the belt, and put their stuff in the middle. The whole time this person's saying, I'm going, hello, excuse me, I'm in line. You don't just move my chair. And he says, I don't want to take too much time. So they got in front of the person in a wheelchair and scooched their stuff because they thought it would be too much time for a grocery store transaction just because the person was in a wheelchair. Like that is beyond audacity. That is just like, I want this person to go to jail for that. I don't know why, but I want this person to go to jail for that.
I'm going to jail because if I had witnessed that, you would have gotten a can of beans to the fucking dome.
And to just like the way that it does not occur to me to do something like that. Well, one, I'm not a dick, but two, that you would actually think your time is so valuable that you can not only cut the line, but literally move the human and kind of prevent their control of the situation altogether.
And I mean, I don't want to put anything on like the person that was working, but I'd be like, no.
Or if they even saw it, they might have been scanning the person,
doing
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, I think accommodation is probably always going to be an issue when it comes to cons. And even I think as some conferences and cons try to be as accessible as they can be. There's elements that I don't think they can control, like the population and stuff like that, to a degree. I mean, with DragonCon, there's not a single square foot that doesn't have a human in it.
No, well, and also you're renting a space. It would be something complete, because where it really needs to start is the hotel needs to design better.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's some issues, and that's what I like to distinguish, especially when I was talking about ClexaCon, is like, I think there's some things that are the issue of the hotel, and I think there's some things that might be the issue of the con. And here's what those things are. And Dallas also was the same type of thing, because, you know, it's a Sheraton, whatever. They got their thing, you know, they're as accommodating as they probably ever planned. But little things need to happen when you have certain conventions, or if you have conventions at all. And I think one thing is adding more seating along the walls would be very helpful to people who need to take those breaks. For wheelchair accommodation, I mean, even just like power stations, maybe. I don't know if that's a necessity for folk. Like, there's things I don't know what to think about. Like, what would be more helpful?
For me, if you know, like, the skyways are really congested, well, then people with mobility issues, you shouldn't be asking them to go through a gauntlet. So maybe perhaps asking other questions when it comes to booking, going, hi, do you have any accessibility issues that you would like to talk about? Because we have accommodations. Would you like to hear about some of our accommodations? We have something where at a certain ground level, we have certain things with certain this, we have certain
because the onus is on you to do all that work for
this is where we're going to get pushback. Because, and how do I know that? Because as a white woman, this is one of our favorite sentences to say is, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I know you didn't know.
You can't be mad at me because I didn't know.
You can't be mad at me because I don't know. No, the reason why I'm mad at you is because we explained this to your great grandmother. And then we explained it to your mother. And now, because they refuse, because they, in their ignorance or their entitlement or their guilt, because they don't want to admit that they were wrong or they fucked up or they did something. And yes, guys, we could be talking about anything right now.
Literally any subject.
Literally any subject right now. We are now having to explain it to you. And I'm sick and tired of explaining it to you.
Yeah.
What would be the best bet, right, is why don't hotels have these people on staff?
Yeah, actually, that's something I was thinking about too. Is like there should be a staff person in accommodation in some way, shape, or form that's almost like a concierge for that purpose, because I feel like a regular concierge would always use the excuse of, I have all of these people to whatever. Yes. Where, like, if someone is more clued in to the kinds of things that, I mean, honestly, I'm of the opinion that everybody in every industry should know certain things, right. I mean, I feel like we should have all learned sign language in school, things like that, like all these kinds of stuff. Right. I think there's things that, like, as a societal level, we could prevent a lot of inaccessibility in just the way we educate at a young age and stuff like that. But then in addition to that, infrastructure is hard to adjust over time without actually putting out other people, like when they expand a freeway and they just plow through a black neighborhood or something like that. Like, there's literal ways in which they could start to adjust the infrastructure that would have a negative impact on a different community as well. So I know that there's some level of difficulty and or impossibility in terms of like full shifts, but there's things that you could always do. You could have experts in certain areas to accommodate, and then you could also just fucking train your people to know things, But
this is a society where we are indoctrinated to be workers, not indoctrinated to think outside the box or to consider other people. We're very much individualistic, right? But the larger number of people are not held to accountability for their
about that kind of choices. Stuff. Yeah, it's like, because once accountability comes up, then it's society's problem, or a bigger group's problem.
It's a bigger group problem, or it's a mental health issue, or fuckity fuck. So, how many, like, we got, so DragonCon it was the last one you just did?
It's the last one I did, and I got home on Tuesday.
Over 100,000 people.
Over 100,000.
Did you do any? Were you active on any panels, or were you
I was not
there
a
as guest?
moderator because again,
Okay.
the application
Right.
period was around the time I was transitioning out of the shop,
Right.
and now that I know and I've been through there, I'm definitely applying next year because I would love to attend again, and I would love to be on some of the panels.
Sounds huge.
It is an enormous. Like I think I texted you like I'm overwhelmed, but in a
You
way
sent
of
me
just, like,
pictures, and I felt overwhelmed.
I was like I was in, like I was in. But I was also overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed in a way of just like, it was so big, I couldn't figure out what to do. So sometimes I just didn't do anything but walk around.
Right.
So that's a downside, I think, is that like there was literally, if you go through the app, because DragonCon also had its own app. If you went through the app, like there would be like 200 things in the same hour block. And you're just like, or, I may be exaggerating, maybe like 40 things, but still like way more than 2 Black panels at the same time kind of thing, like, but 40 panels at one time, or photo shoots or whatever. So I got to a point, like I'm scrolling through and I'm like, I don't even know what to go to. I have no idea. And I kind of picked a couple random things. And so most of what I went to were things that had to do with people that I kind of knew online. So again, I met some people online. So the person that you referred to earlier that I took a picture with, that's Afua Richardson. She is an artist. And so if you're familiar with the Lovecraft Country, she drew the in-show comic book that the little girl draws. That's all her artwork.
Oh, wow.
She also is known for the Women of Wakanda poster drawing cover that she did for one of the Black Panther issues. She's done X-Men 92. Wonder Woman. She's been in the game for a while. She's done so much art within comics, DC, Marvel, etc. Some independents as well. And then right now she's working on her own comic, which is called Aquarius: The Book of Mer, which is a story about mermaids, and it's using the sort of the fairy tales, or whatever you want to call them, of the Orisha, the mermaid Orishas from Africa, but all over the world. She's using different mermaid stories from all over the world. And on her Kickstarter, she had a spot where you could pay for it to be kind of a background mermaid and whatever. And a birthday gift to me from Byron was that level. So I am going to be a background mermaid in her book when she finishes it. But I've known her. I've interviewed her for the comic book shop, and I've talked to her. We're like actual Facebook friends instead of just like her page. And like we know each other, we chat and stuff like that. So this is the first time I got to see her in person. And the funny thing is I was walking. So there was someone that I knew from Houston that was also at DragonCon at the same time. So we hung out, and I was saying at some point I need to get down to where Afua is tabling because I want to meet her and I have a gift for her and stuff like that. And so we're literally talking about that in the moment. Like we're trying to plan out our day. It's the first day of us walking around the con. And I'm like, I don't know what you need to do, but at some point I need to do this. And then I turn around and go, that's Afua. And then she turns around because I saw her from behind.
And that's a Sharmane.
And then she turns around and she's like, what? And I'm like, it's Sharmane from Gulf Coast Cosmos. And so we hugged, we took photos or whatever. And then I saw her at her table a couple of days in a row as well. But to get into the building that had the vendor section, you had to be in a line, and it was wrapped around the city building and stuff like that. And then it would double up on itself. So not only were you wrapped around the building, you were also on a sidewalk, squiggled, serpentined. So you'd go up a street, down the same street, back up the street to go to the next thing. So it would take like an hour and 45 minutes to get into the vendor hall.
That is a lot.
So that's why I only did it twice, because by that third day I was like, as much as I would like to, I couldn't go and I couldn't do it a third time.
100,000 people in one.
Yeah. It's the way you feel like because again, I stayed about 1.5 miles away from the con, and the immediacy at which the crowdedness of downtown shifted, like you didn't have to travel but maybe 4 blocks in a car and then no crowd.
Okay.
So, but like this radius of where all these connected hotels are, it was just congestion, just people and people and people.
So this is a con that's been around for a very long time. Obviously, you don't just go. You don't just you don't just start at 100,000 people.
Yeah, no, it's the biggest one I've ever been to.
Did you have fun?
I I had tons of fun. I did.
Okay, good.
I am not a person though. So it's funny because, like I said, I knew some folks there. And so when I was standing around the people that I knew,
Right.
I think I give off, she's not having fun.
Well, you have a rested bitch face.
Because it's not a rested bitch face. It's my regular ass face. So I'm just sitting there and I'm soaking things in, and I just don't emote. Like, I'm more emotive on podcasts than I am in person, because like it's a defense mechanism. I'm keeping myself tight so that people don't pay attention to me. And so I happened to mention on Blerd Comics last weekend when I was telling my podcast co-host on that one about, I was like, because he knows me well, so I'm like, you know how I am when I'm at these cons, like I don't show any emotion. And so I think people don't know that I'm having fun. And he laughs because he knows me. And our guest that was on the show, who was in attendance at DragonCon, makes a face that clues me into they don't know me well enough to know that I was like that. So it looked like he was going, oh, like it just snapped into place that I was, because I kept saying, I'm like, today was a great day, but in this like monotone way that would never indicate to someone who doesn't know me very well
that you were having a great time.
And but then I ran into people that I've known for years that have either been guests on one of my shows, or they're just in the world, the comic book world. So I ran into Afua Richardson, Charles Xavier, who is that's his real name, Ebony Warrior from Ebony Warrior Studios. We've known each other. They've been on my show a while back, and we've known each other for years. We were hunting each other. Oh,
he was
down.
There. Oh,
yeah, he was there. So we were looking for each other the whole time. We were like, I was sending messages. I was like, "Where are you? Where are you?" And he would get back to me like 4 or 5 hours later, because he's also in full Gondor gear.
Dude,
like
it was
gear amazing
that he.
You should see it in person.
I can't even.
You couldn't tell me that wasn't like it was a 3D printed thing, but you couldn't tell me that wasn't
watching
full
him
armor.
on TikTok. I've been watching him for TikTok for like over a year now, I guess.
Yeah.
And I watched him make that. I mean, he's always made great stuff.
Yeah, he makes amazing stuff. But his son had a little version of it too.
Oh, I know. It was so cute.
But like, he was our first professional guest in cosplay and of anything on Blerd Comics. So we've known him for a number of years. And so I'm messaging him like, we're gonna take that picture. We're gonna find each other. We finally found each other on the second to last day of the con at a Black Geeks of DragonCon photo shoot, because they do all these photo shoots with people that are in similar cosplay or whatever, like themed. So there might be like the Lord of the Rings photo shoot or the Star Trek photo shoot. And in this case, this was the Black Geeks photo shoot. And so we went there, and so I saw him come through, and I ran up to him. I was like, Charles. He turns around, because most people will call him Ebony Warrior, but like I said, I've known him for a couple of years, so I was just like, Charles.
He's Mr. Ebony Warrior to me.
So he turns around, and I was like, it was like, because I had my mask on, so I was like, Sharmane, and he goes, oh, thank God, because we were sitting there like trying to find each other for 4 days, like 3 days up until that point.
Is he really as tall as I think he is?
He's fucking tall. He was way taller than I expected him to be.
Because whenever he moves the camera around, sometimes like.
You would think he was on stilts. Like, if you look at there's one full body post. I'll send it to you, but it is on my Instagram. But there's one full body shot of the two of us. I look like a toddler. He's so fucking tall. Yeah, because that was the part, is that I saw him. He was still in the hotel. We were outside at the photo shoot. He was still in the hotel, walking down the hallway, and I was like, there he is, And I just kind of made my way through the thing until I found him. So I saw him, and then I also follow and have been commenting for years with the folks from Cosplay Your Way, which is a group of cosplayers that started at DragonCon, mostly Black cosplayers, but over time it's basically a cosplay for kind of like us, people from marginalized group, predominantly people of color, about like doing cosplay your own way. And so there's some main founders, and then there's some like other people that are involved, and I've been following them for a couple of years now. And so, but I've also messaged with them and chatted with them for the shop or for podcasts for a while and stuff. So they were at 2 different events that I attended. And when I walked up, I was like, it was cool, because I was like, I'm the daBlasianBlerd, and they knew who I was. So like,
that's awesome.
They knew who I was. And so we chatted, we hugged, we took pictures or whatever. And it was just like, it was so motivating to like, I did do some cosplay. I didn't go all the way out. There was a cosplay I had planned for DragonCon that is not finished yet. So I hope to get it done in time for New York Comic Con. If not, it'll be next year's thing. But so I pulled back my gambit because I've only put that one out one time, so this is my first time to do that at a con. And then I did like a half-assed version of Tatsu from Way of the House Husband, one of my favorite animes, where I have the apron and I have the tote bag and I have the glasses, but instead of wearing a black suit, I wore a dress. And so I was like a femme version of the Tatsu character. And then the other one I did was a very unrecognizable Riri Williams. So I literally had the outfit from one of the covers of Ironheart, but because I'm both a light-skinned mixed race person, and because it's not a character that most people will recognize away, a couple people, like one lady asked me, she said, "You're like me, huh? Just chilling in your regular clothes at the con." I'm like, actually, I am in cosplay right now. And so like somebody else says, "Oh, that's a cute little shirt," or something like that. And I was like, "Yeah, it's a Riri Williams shirt." And they were like, "Oh." So like I had an Iron Man hand.
Yeah.
Because the picture from the book is that she's fixing the Iron Man.
That's right.
Gauntlet. So I just grabbed one of the Infinity Gauntlets, like a vinyl one. I had this. I had the tank top, which is a red tank top with the
thing on it, the emblem.
Arc reactor, black pants with red stripes down the side of it, and Chucks. You know. So it was just too subtle to pick up on or whatever. So that's the cosplay that I did do, and
I'm assuming because it's so big, they have representation from like lots of different things. I'm hoping
all kinds of stuff. Okay. Every fandom under the sun. There was
but like queer. Do they have like, hey, we're talking about queer stuff? No.
Yeah, they had queer stuff. They had this whole Asian section that had different things. They had a black section of stuff. They had like I said, it was hard to go through. Like you're scrolling through the thing, but
how do they if it's multiple locations and multiple floors, I'm assuming when they go, okay, what is your table?
So so two different things. They group some stuff. So like in a section of a hotel, this would be like the kids track. And so everything within this area would be like the kids panels. This one would be the costume track. And this one would be the sci-fi and whatever. So in terms of panels, they did kind of have things grouped together. In terms of the exhibitor hall, though, that was in a building called the America's Mart. And there was it's two side-by-side buildings. And one side, they had all the gaming stuff. So that was on multiple floors gaming. And the other side was like the artists, the comic book creators, the vendors and stuff like that. And that was on the other side. And those were joined by a skywalk. So on one floor was like your comic book artists, tables and stuff like that. On the other floor would be like your costuming ones or swords or things like that. So every floor had a different kind of thing.
And how long does a panel?
They were like 50 minutes, 45 to 50 minutes.
45. Yeah. Okay.
So like if you were staying on one track, you could technically just like stay in an area probably for panels and stuff. But like in my case, I was trying to go from one panel to one that was so far away that at some point I just gave up. You know, once I realized it was in one of the other hotels, I was like, fuck this.
Yeah, I got that sounds exhausting.
So sometimes I literally didn't go to anything because it was a hotel or two away and I didn't want to have to work my way through.
So you would have to be really mindful of if you wanted to go and have the most experience, then you would need to know which hotel is hosting what, and then try to stay there.
They gave you a book in the beginning, and you had the app. The app was too daunting because you're like doom scrolling.
I'm sure.
With the book, it's also like organized the best way I think an event that is that large could be. But it was just wild. So you also had like your artist alley and your signings. Your signings happened in a different place.
Your pictures areas.
Yeah, your pictures area happened in a different place. So I would say, do I think I had a full and complete con experience? Probably not. I don't know how you could. No. But I had fun every single day. There's also a big parade that happens on this Saturday, and my friend that was there on the first day was dressed as Miles Morales, and someone stopped us in the street and said, "You should join our Spider-Man section of the parade." I can't say the word parade because we don't have a Miles yet. And so they exchanged information, and I guess at some point throughout the night, he must have found out that he could go because I get a message like, "Hey, I'm at the parade," like I'm gonna be in the parade and stuff. And so I went to the parade to watch it, and yeah, he was in it. So
That's
just
awesome.
just attending the con, and he got, because his cosplay was so good, he got invited to being in the parade. One thing that I think, and we'll end on this part because this is way longer than I expected it to be, but one thing that I think you'll really love in terms of pure nerddom. Cosplay wise, like I really like when people are really specific and they do something just like so nerdy, because it's just so not general or whatever, but like just like a very, like there was one guy, for example, there's one guy who just was dressed up as, you know, Dr. Ken from Community and all those other shows.
Yeah, okay.
There's an episode of Community in which they played D&D, and he played a dark elf, and he painted himself black with a white wig, and he had ears and stuff like that, and he was wearing like a regular ass clothes. There was someone dressed like that. So it's just like literally one moment of this show, and this person was dressed like that, right?
I do appreciate somebody. I also like people who merge two things together, or a couple things
there was
together.
A lot of mashup cosplay and
love
stuff like that. I really love that too. But here's the thing that it will end on, because it was the nerdiest thing I've ever seen.
Okay, I'm ready.
At the parade, so everything was kind of in sections. So there would be like the 501st from Star Wars, and there was like the Star Trek section, a horror section, whatever. There was even a section of people who dressed as different characters that Nicolas Cage has played. Like, they had these big cutout heads of Nicolas Cage. So it'd be like Arizona Nicolas Cage, or, you know, like all the stuff, whatever. Okay. There was the Indiana Jones section. And so there was 4 Daddy Joneses. There was all kinds of indies and stuff like that, whatever. There was somebody dressed as the fucking Boulder, and he was chasing an indie serpentine down the street. That's top tier. Nerdiest.
That's top tier. That's top tier.
Was dying. I was like, "Is
the Boulder wins the internet, everybody?"
And I just imagine like sitting with your friend and being like, "Hey, let's do like a group cosplay or whatever." It's like, "What do you want to do?" It's like, "You know, I'm really into Indiana Jones." Like, "Okay, I'll do indie. What are you gonna do?" The fucking Boulder, and I'm gonna chase you around the street. It was great because it was a hill. So they were serpentining.
Oh no! Please tell me you got a picture.
I have a little bit of it on video, so it's in the drive. I just have to comb through the video.
Oh my god, we gotta.
But I also got it from the side, so like I didn't get it full on. I wish I could get it full on, but yeah. So in terms of did I have fun at the con, my answer is there was a dude dressed as the Boulder that was chasing Indiana Jones down the street.
So yes.
It's so hilarious. Like I was so in love with it. Like it was so stupid. It made me so happy.
That's honestly that's
it's brilliant.
It's brilliant and perfect.
Like I used to throw Halloween parties every year because like Halloween's always my favorite holiday. If someone showed up to one of my holiday parties dressed like that, I would give them money. Like I would, I don't know what else I would do. I would like, what can I do?
What can I do for you? Because you win the internet.
You win. So yeah, it was really brilliant. So now I have, well, I guess at the time I came back, I had 30 days between coming home and getting ready for New York Comic Con. I have a little app on my phone that's counting it down. I have 26 days.
We have lots to plan
between now and then to get me there. There's a number of people, again, this is the theme of this current phase of travel. There's a number of people that I know on the internets that I am going to meet in person for the first time there. Okay. One of which is Stephanie Williams, who is the writer of the current Nubia run of Nubia and the Amazons run. I've interviewed her for Gulf Coast Cosmos. We also are email buddies, and they are going to be tabling at New York Comic Con. So I'm going to make sure I spend some time. They've also written this amazing book called Living Heroes, which is like living single, but with Monica Rambeau, Storm, She-Hulk, and Misty Knight.
That sounds like fun. I need a copy of that.
I'll send you a copy. So this is the book that I buy in bulk whenever because it's like $10. So I'll buy like 4 or 5 of them, and then I'll give them away as gifts randomly when I didn't know someone's birthday was up.
I wonder if Fiona has read that. She's
So
into that stuff.
I'll send you a copy because I
right.
definitely have extras. So she's the person I'm meeting. There's also a friend of mine that is on the Why So Serious podcast named Mike, who is going to be there with all of his friends, and they're going to do a group cosplay. So we'll meet up with them. There's a gym guy that I know. I used to be in a queer gym, and they started their own business.
Nice.
They're going to be there. They're also a body painter, like a body art painter.
Ooh, I love body art paint.
Which I cannot afford unless
I
anybody
know.
wants to give me $800 right now.
I used to have. I remember I used to be a bartender in Santa Cruz, and there was a street kid that used to come in, and he would take. I would let him sit up in the corner, and every night he would spray paint my
your tatas.
Mm-hmm. And so he could practice, and then he'd have spots so he could make money. But he was so talented. I would literally wear a really low, like barely covering.
I remember the shirts you used to wear in Santa Cruz.
Yeah, I still have them, but my boobies are not as epic as I used to be. I'm 40, but I used to pull down my shirt to be underneath my bra.
Yeah.
And nobody would tell because he would create some of the most beautiful things that have ever been on my body.
Yeah, so he does.
That's awesome.
He does superhero body art, and I would really like to do that.
Do it.
I can't afford it.
One day. One day. We're getting ready.
But he's going to be there. There's some podcasters from the Asian American Podcasters Association that I'm going to meet up for cups of teas or something like that. So I already know that just like these other things, there's going to be a ton of people that I have opportunity to connect with, and I'm ready. I'm ready. I wanted to.
Do you want to tell them about your cosplay, or do you want to wait for their next?
I guess I can kind of tell because it's not a big audience or anything like that. I don't think anybody's gonna copy it. But even though, I've been dressing up for a long time for Halloween and stuff like that. But the first thing that I dressed up in that actually made me feel like I potentially was a cosplayer was the year that in 2016, I did Lady Joker. And what happens was we had an event to go to, and I couldn't get my costumes together. And we went to a costume shop in Santa Monica, and they had one single Mad Hatter costume in a bag. And I was just like, fuck it, I'm just going to grab it. And then when I got it home, I was like, I could be Joker, which is kind of what I wanted to do anyway. I've always wanted to do a Lady Joker. So I just started to glue some toilet paper to my face with spirit gum and stuff like that. I made some scars. I did face makeup. I threw a cheap-ass green wig on and this Mad Hatter costume. And I instantly became a Lady Joker. And it was such a hit at the parties that I went to. And it was my first year in LA from when I moved there as an adult. And I went to a number of Hollywood parties because a friend of mine was an actor. And so we went to all these actor parties, and I got a lot of attention from it. And I felt like, oh shit, I could really cosplay now. I've always wanted
Lady Joker has been your thing.
So Lady Joker has been my thing. I started doing another cosplay. I got the bug. I was into it, but I always go back to, I fantasy build Joker costumes all the time. And I haven't dug it back out because there's a period of time where it was just like, is Joker the right thing or whatever? But I have so much fun dressing as my version of Joker. So I have decided, I guess what triggered it is at DragonCon, there was a ton of Loki variants. So many people dressed as different kinds of Lokis. And I have a t-shirt that I got from Loot Crate years ago that was a Joker Loki mashup, but it's it's mostly Loki's outfit, but in purple and gold and stuff like that. Yeah, and so it's like a Joker Loki jokey. I'm going to do the reverse of that because the Loki variant thing was kind of fun. I'm going to do jokey where I am wearing a green suit.
Okay.
But everything else will mostly be Joker related. I'll do Joker makeup, green suit. I have Loki's double dagger situation, and the horns are coming. So I got the horns that I got are the President Loki horns. But I think it'll be a fun mashup, and it'll give me a chance to dig back out some of my Joker accoutrement, like my bang gun and my hand buzzer and all that other kind of stuff. So that's one of the things. That's the big one I'm going to do. I'm also doing Shinobi Concho from the Demon Slayer.
Ooh.
And I have that. I just need to and I have the sword and everything like that. So The only reason why I'm doing it at New York Comic Con and I didn't do it at DragonCon is because I booked my flight back in January. I was on United because I had a credit that I had to use before it went away. And on United, you have to pay to check your bags.
Right.
And so I didn't want to have to pay to check my weapons. But I'm flying to New York on Southwest. So I'm going to use that 2 bags of check for my cosplay.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm doing those 2. And if I get done with my Rocket, which is a character from the Milestone universe, Icon and Rocket is the current book run that they're in. I have most of that cosplay ready. I just need to fix the belt, which is like an energy glowy belt and stuff like that. So I got to figure out how to do that. I have a belt template. I just need to figure out how to do the LED stuff. And if that's the case, then I think I'll leave it at 3 cosplay for that.
I like it.
Yeah. So I'm excited. I'm really, really excited about going to New York. I haven't been in New York since I left the East Coast, and I'm excited. Yeah.
I'm excited to hear about it. So let's do it.
But yeah, so that's been my journey of the last summer. Oklahoma, Dallas, Anaheim, Atlanta. So yeah, okay. So that's it. Don't forget to follow us on social media, Queer Far Pod on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Mm-hmm. And you can also now go to our website, queerfarpod.com. And you can see the latest videos if you're not already watching us on YouTube, and all that kind of stuff. We'll eventually get a store up there once we get some of our little swag things built. But we're growing. We had a really good following on our When Is Someday Now episode. Yep. And we're still, because I just released the queer research one, that's about average at the moment, but we're starting to build our audience. So please let us know if there's stuff that you want to hear that you haven't heard from us yet. There's a bunch of episodes we have planned on different topics related to either traveling in general or moving abroad.
Yeah. Or if you want to be interviewed, let us pick your brain about, hey, do you like to go to cons? Are you part of a marginalized group? Want to hear your perspective. Right?
Yeah. Definitely it's time for us to start talking to people that are out there doing the stuff that we're trying to figure out,
right?
What it's like for folks.
Absolutely.
As people actually from those different marginalized groups and everything like that. So that's it. I know this one ran long, but we are waxed, and fully packed. So let's go.
Peace. Love you guys. Bye, internets.
Queer and Far is a ManeHustle Media Podcast, produced and edited by Sharmane Fury. Co-hosted by Sharmane Fury, a.k.a. daBlasianBlerd, and Shae Nahnigans. Music is Big Band Savage Jazz by Pine Groove. If you like what you've heard on Queer and Far, please subscribe, rate, and review on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.